Sakura Haruka is a high school student who lives life the way he wants to, but is shunned by his peers in school as a result. Early one morning, a woman is being hassled by a group of guys who have already peaked in life. She's got a carton full of eggs, so she's obviously got places to be, but these guys don't care and keep asking her to come have some fun with them. She refuses and tells the leader that she would smash her eggs into his face if it wouldn't be incredibly wasteful, but she has no time to waste on lowlives like him and his friends, so she will be leaving now. The leader doesn't know how to take no for an answer, so he forcefully grabs her hand, hurting her in the process, which is when Sakura intervenes. At first, he tries to be civil and handle the situation like a reasonable person, so he tells the leader of the boys to pack it up because it's too early in the morning to be doing dumb stuff like this. Unfortunately, logical reasoning doesn't work when your brain is the size of a walnut, so the leader tries to swing on Sakura, only to get his punch cleanly dodged. He then proceeds to get beaten up so bad that the cameraman had to cut away, but once he is back in frame, Sakura is standing over him, calling him and his friends weak. He's not scared of a fight, so if anyone has a problem with him, it should remember that his name is Sakura Haruka from Furin High. Afterwards, he simply begins walking away without saying a word to complete his badass moment, but the girl who had been watching everything happen the whole time finally snaps out of her daze and chases after him. She grabs a hold of his arm and thanks him for saving her, but Sakura is confused because no one has ever thanked him for anything before. His brain short-circuits, so he instantly goes into tsundere mode as he tells her that he didn't do it for her sake or anything. He just got pissed off by the way the guy was acting. The girl ignores his outburst and asks if he is hungry by any chance, which Sakura initially denies, but no one can turn down a good omelette, so he ends up at the girl's restaurant. While making small talk, she realizes that Sakura isn't originally from this town, which explains why she hasn't seen him around before. Recently, there have been a lot of gangs fighting in the area, so normal people tend to steer clear of the area. She introduces herself as Tachibana, but Sakura is still trying to figure out why this girl is being so friendly to him. Most people would be afraid of someone who they saw take on 5 guys easily, but she doesn't seem to care at all. She asks if he's not going to eat the food she made for him since he hasn't taken a bite yet, so Sakura immediately starts eating and he loves it. As he eats, Tachibana comments on how unique he looks since half his face is colored different, but she can tell that it's just the way he looks naturally. Her face gets a little too close, so Sakura freaks out and jumps back. After calming down a bit, Sakura says he's surprised that she doesn't find him weird since most people would call him gross for the way he looked. Tachibana doesn't find his appearance all that strange since she is used to seeing people with much worse fashion choices. But that aside, she asks if his appearance has anything to do with the reason he came here in the first place. Sakura tells her she's right since he came here because the way he looks doesn't matter when it comes to a fight. Furin is notorious for having the most brain-dead students but also the best fighters, so brawls take place every day to decide who's on top. Sakura isn't excluded from the Walnut Brain Society, so a school like this is the only place that he's got a shot at making a name for himself. Tachibana now understands Sakura's motivations, but that doesn't stop her from making fun of him for being so excited for school that he wore his uniform today when Furin doesn't open until tomorrow. Sakura denies it, but his embarrassment only tells Tachibana that she's right about him. While they were bickering, an old man named Yama had just finished his meal and is heading out. But just before he leaves, Sakura notices that he left his bag behind, so he gets his attention and hands it back to him. A little while later, Tachibana comes over and says Yama was thankful for Sakura's help, so he wanted her to give him some candy as a sign of gratitude. Sakura still isn't used to being thanked for anything, so he asks why the people here are being so nice to him. Normally, people would take one look at him and think he is a delinquent, so they'd be on guard. One time, he tried to return someone's wallet, but he got the cops called on him because the person accused him of stealing it. Tachibana tells Sakura that he made the right choice coming to Fujin, but as he is now, there is no way he's beating anyone, let alone becoming the top dog, and that all because of one thing. He may be strong, but he is alone, so he's gonna get his ass jumped. Hearing her say he's alone strikes a nerve with Sakura, so he angrily states that he is not weak, so there's no reason for him to rely on other people just to win a fight. She admits that Sakura may have the strength to back up his claim, but it would be best if he goes to meet some other kids from Furin, then he will understand what she means. While walking home, Sakura finds himself confronted by the gang leader from earlier, and this time he has brought the entire squad for the sole purpose of jumping Sakura. He isn't really in the mood to deal with this right now, so he just tries to ignore them and walk away, but the leader stops him just to start making fun of the way he looks. Honestly, this is what Sakura was waiting for, since this jerk is the kind of person he has been dealing with his entire life. They always look at him with disgust, so he has given up on trying to fit in. People just make assumptions based on what he looks like, so if the world wants him to be a delinquent, he's going to do just that. He punches the leader straight in the face once more and proceeds to take on the entire gang all at once, and he's actually winning. They keep coming after him, but even though some of them are armed with bats, he continues to avoid their attacks and single-handedly drop the average IQ score among the gang members with the brain damage he's inflicting. While all this is going on, Tachibana was inside her store cleaning up the dishes, and while I've got nothing against her, this dumbass decided it was a good idea to go outside and check what's going on. Well, she gets grabbed and held at knife point so they can use her as a hostage to get Sakura to let his guard down. However, as soon as Sakura sees Tachibana in danger, he pulls off some cool acrobatics and drops the guy before he ever had the chance to use his knife. One guy tries to sneak up behind Sakura, but he's not going to call for something as cheap as that and roundhouse kicks the guy's face into a wall. He continues beating them down, but having to protect Tachibana is really limiting the amount of damage he can do, and if this keeps up, he's going to get overrun. He doesn't even know why he bothered helping her in the first place, since he barely knows her. As he continues fighting, one of the guys he had knocked out before regains consciousness and grabs the knife that had been thrown to the floor, slashes Sakura's ankle. He then almost gets his head smashed in by a guy with a bat, but he manages to stay back at the last moment, although with his injured ankle, his mobility is going to be limited. He has no chance of evading the next attack, so he just braces himself for the inevitable beating he's going to get. However, before the bat can make him even dumber than he was before, he gets saved by a guy who was also wearing the same Furin uniform as him. The guy thanks Sakura for protecting Tachibana, and she looks happy to see him. He asked her not to tell their boss that she was in danger so he doesn't flip out, but now that he is here, he'll make sure the situation gets handled. He grabs the bat from the gang member and elbows High-Face so hard that he gets put down for a compulsory nap, after which he then turns to the rest of the people there as his friends arrive. These punks have made a mess of the town with their antics, so they are going to have to pay for it. The gang is understandably scared since they were already barely winning against one guy, but now they've got to deal with 4 more. There's no backing out at this point, so they all attack at once even though they know they got no chance at winning. All the Furin guys are just as tough as Sakura, so this fight is a one-sided beating. One guy tries to go after Sakura, and since his ankle is injured, he's not able to get out of the way in time. Luckily, Hiraji steps in and kicks the guy into a wall. He tells Sakura to stand back if he is hurt, since they won't be able to protect him if he gets himself caught in the middle, and Sakura just remains dumbfounded as people begin to cheer for the Furin guys to beat up the gang so they can get on with their days. This is nothing like what Sakura was expecting when he came here, and he never would have thought that the people here would be so supportive of Furin. Tachibana then explains to him that when she said gang make this place unsafe, that it only applies up until about 2 years ago. This was because of the students at Furin High who took the town's security upon themselves and put up a notice board at the entrance. Anyone dumb enough to cause trouble in their town will leave the town with more brain damage than they started with because they are the town's shield, otherwise known as Windbreaker. That's why the townspeople love them so much now. It's true that they were a bunch of lowlives 2 years ago, but that was 2 years ago, and now they are loved by everyone here. Sakura can't help but feel jealous that despite fighting like that, these guys are still accepted by everyone here as though they are heroes when all he ever got was scorn. He is still in shock when the townspeople turn their attention to him and start thanking him for holding off the gang until everyone else arrived. Since his ankle is hurt, an old lady offers to give him some first aid, but all this kindness is too much for him to process, so he has another outburst. Tachibana understands why he is acting this way, so she takes over the first aid for him and says that she can tell that he is alone, but he didn't choose to be alone. Whatever circumstances may have caused it, he doesn't need to give up on the people here because they need him. He was still kind enough to return Yema's bag, and he even put himself at risk to save her. So if he is willing to look towards them, then they won't turn their backs on him. Sakura doesn't know how to respond, so instead he takes off running towards the crowd and proceeds to jump 10 feet into the air. He transitions into a drop kick aimed at the gang leader who is trying to sneak up on Hiraji, and while he's not sure how he feels about this whole playing hero thing, but if people will accept him the way he is, then he will fight to defend the town. The next day, Sakura arrives at the diner, but he's got a foul look on his face because he was coaxed into giving a piggyback ride to a granny. Since they've arrived, Sakura tells the granny to get off his back already, because he's not above slugging the grandma in the face, so Granny Sayo jumps off his back and Sakura realizes she tricked him more than he thought. She had told him her hips hurt so bad that she could barely walk at all. But all of a sudden, she's able to move perfectly fine and doesn't even acknowledge it when Sakura tries to call her out on it, making him even more angry. However, despite the granny's jokes, she's still grateful to Sakura for helping her get to the diner this morning, so she thanks him. Sakura still isn't used to being thanked for things, so he starts blushing once again and wants to leave to save himself some embarrassment, but before he can go, Tachibana calls him back because she's got something special just for him. She offers him a full breakfast, free of charge, since his entrance ceremony to Furin is going to happen today, but now that she thinks about it, the ceremony doesn't start until 12, but Sakura is already dressed for it, and it's only 10 o'clock. This gives her perfect ammunition to start teasing Sakura some more for being excited about attending Furin, but he denies it and says he was just out for a walk today. Tachibana doesn't blame him for being excited, though, since she knows there are a lot of interesting people there for Sakura to meet, but moments later the front door swings wide open and Nareya walks in, or rather faceplants into the room. After picking himself off the floor, he shows everyone his brand new Furin uniform, but Sakura points out that he forgot to take the tags off clothes. Nareya then proceeds to roll around on the ground in an attempt to get the tags off his back, and Sakura can't believe a guy as clumsy as him is going to be attending Furin as well. But Nareya takes offense to this and says he's never seen Sakura around, so he must be from out of town. Which is true, but it's not like it matters where he came from. Another thing Nareya scrutinizes is the way Sakura's hair and eyes look, but while Sakura was expecting him to call him disgusting or something, he actually just thinks his hair is turning white because of stress. Tachibana finds the whole thing funny, so she acts as the mediator and introduces both of them. She explains that Sakura just moved into town yesterday, but Mirai still has no idea who Sakura is supposed to be, so he takes a look in his top secret book of names, and according to it, Sakura is a complete nobody. Sakura was about ready to throw hands at this point, but Tachibana tells him that Nareya doesn't mean any harm, he just acts like that sometimes. Nareya goes on to warn Sakura that Furin is an ordinary school to be taken lightly. The students here stood up for the locals and drive away wicked troublemakers, so all the new students to the people look up to them. With that being said, it makes no sense to him why Sakura, who has no ties to this town whatsoever, would want to come to school here. Sakura answers that he's here to take the top spot at Furin Academy. He thinks it's cool that they are protecting the town, and he knows there are a bunch of strong guys there as well, so he would be satisfied if he knew he was the strongest among them. Nareya thinks he shouldn't set goals for himself that he won't be able to achieve, because if he does, then the stress will make him go bald. Sakura has had enough of Nareya's antics, so he tells him to get ready because they're about to throw hands. Nareya doesn't like the sound of that, so he makes an excuse about it being late, so he has to leave now. Later, as Sakura leaves, he is pondering what Tachibana had told him when his path gets blocked by a surprise tray of baked goods. The baker offers them to him for free, but Sakura is confused as to why he is getting such an offer for no reason. They say it's their way of giving back to the Furin kids since they are always so helpful, and they want Sakura to have the bread because he was single-handedly holding off the troublemakers the day before, so it's the least they could do. Sakura once again can't handle being thanked for anything, so he tries to decline by saying he's not hungry, but the bakers are insistent and give him the bread anyway so he can eat it for lunch today. And they weren't the only ones to offer Sakura free stuff. After all the thanks the townspeople gave him, it looks like Sakura just did a week worth of shopping. It still isn't clicking in Sakura's brain that some people are just nice when you help them out, so he thinks this town must really be messed up. But then again, maybe he was just assuming that they would never treat him like a member of the community. He thinks about it for a moment, but then he gets startled by a girl calling out to him from behind because she needs his help. In a dark alleyway, we see Nareya getting the shit kicked out of him by a group of hoodlums, and they say it's because Nareya interrupted them while they were trying to raise up that girl that we saw ask Sakura for help. The situation is pretty similar to what happened with Sakura the day before, but the only difference is that Nareya interfered knowing damn well that he can't handle a one-on-one, let alone a 1-5 fight. The leader of the guys calls Nareya pathetic for losing a fight so easily, but he's going to leave now since there's nothing more for him to gain by being here. But Nareya won't let him go for some reason and grabs into his shirt. The guy thinks this is just sad now since Nareya has no shot at taking him down. But if he keeps being annoying like this, he's going to have to take this fight seriously and beat Nareya to a pulp. Nareya refuses to give up and begins reciting the Furin school motto to purge all evil as if he thinks it will give him a power-up. But we all know power-ups only come from flashbacks if the bully is about to knock him out so he can't pester them anymore. However, before the hammer fist comes down on Nareya's head, he is saved by Sakura, who comes flying in with a kick to the face. Narei doesn't understand why Sakura would come here to save him despite them barely knowing each other. But Sakura isn't here because he wants to save him, he just really hates people who enjoy picking on the weak in large groups, so he's going to take care of them. Narei tries to warn him not to get involved since he can't possibly take on 5 guys at once, but moments later the 5 guys are all laid out on the ground and Sakura is still standing. Narei is amazed by the strength Sakura possesses and thanks him for saving him just now, but he apologizes because Sakura must be disappointed in him. Sakura has no real feelings on the matter, but he tells Narei to know what he is capable of handling before he gets himself into fights out of nowhere. Narei gives his backstory of how he used to get bullied a lot in middle school, but then one day he was saved by someone from Furin. Normally, he would only ever be afraid of someone like that, but in that moment, he thought the guy looked really cool. He wanted to be just like that guy, which is why he came to Furin, but he is still such a loser. Sakura thinks about it for a moment and realizes that he may have judged Narei a little too harshly at first. He may not be much of a fighter, but he still had the guts to help someone in trouble and not back away from a fight. At least in Sakura's books, that makes him a decent guy. The girl from earlier comes running over to see if Narei is alright, and since he doesn't want to be seen crying, he says he is alright. The girl is thankful to him for stepping in to save her when those guys started hassling her, and Sakura as well for helping save Narei when she asked. Once more, Sakura is embarrassed by being thanked, so he tries to leave, but Narei calls out to him and pulls out his top-secret book so he can start recording everything there is to know about Sakura. From his height to the type of girl he likes. Sakura doesn't appreciate getting his info documented like this, so he smacks Narei on the head, but Narei says he was just doing it because he enjoys gathering the data of people he looks up to. And that gets Sakura to let him hang around since he's not that bad. Narei may not be of much use in a fight, but he is sure he can help show Sakura around town since he is new here. But for now, they have to head to school since the entrance ceremony will be starting soon. After that, he and Narei finally arrive at the school, and Narei is pumped to check out the class rosters to see which class he'll be in. Luckily, he and Sakura are in the same class, as well as a bunch of other people he looks up to, but has never actually spoken to. Sakura tells him to stop geeking out over who's going to be in the same class as him because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. But after Narei takes another look at the class rosters, he sees something that wipes the color off his face. As they walk up the stairs to class, Narei pleads with Sakura to try to be friendly with the people in class so he doesn't cause any problems, but there's no way he's going to pander to anyone for no reason. Narei just wants him to show everyone that he means no harm since he comes from out of town and may not be accepted right away. But Sakura is already warming up for a fight, exactly what Narei does not want him to do. One wrong move and the whole class may see him as an enemy of Furin, at which point the entire school will turn against him. But Sakura doesn't see a problem with that since he came here to get to the top of the school, so it wouldn't matter to him if everyone came at him at once. Upon entering the class, there's a whole spectrum of students, including the one in the back who's just doing pull-ups. Everyone starts staring daggers at Sakura, and he's liking the way things are going since the class looks like they mean actual business. He gets approached by one eye patch-wearing dude, and he seems to be pretty nice. This is Shuo, and he's inside Mirei's top-secret book, so you know he's got to be cool. However, the eye patch is just for show though. But that's enough discussion about himself, so if he wants to hear about Sakura. Sakura was ready to start fighting immediately, but he is surprised when Sue just patting him on the back and telling him he did a good job defending the town yesterday. Seeing Sue being friendly with Sakura, all the others in class become interested in him and ask what he did. Sue explains that he was the one who single-handedly held off that gang that attacked the town, so they all have a good amount of respect for him immediately. And Narei is glad because this means Sakura won't have a target on his back. However, when he's asked why he came here, Sakura answers honestly and says he came to get the top spot at the school, and after saying that he now has the attention of all the heavy hitters in class. Most notably Sugita, who chucks a desk out of nowhere and threatens to crush Sakura, but Sakura was already looking for a fight, so this works out well for him. Sagashita is well known in this school and has been visiting long before he officially joined. His talents were recognized, so he was allowed to be called a member even while he was still only in middle school. And right now, the reason he is going after Sakura is because he has somewhat of an obsession with the person in the current #1 spot. So whenever anyone says they want to challenge that guy, Sagashita goes apeshit crazy. One of the students pleads with Sue to stop Sagashita before he kills the new guy, but Sue didn't come to school today to put himself within punching range for no reason. As Sakura is still fighting, he accidentally slips on some white liquid on the floor, so Sabeshita tries to take full advantage of the blunder and wins up a haymaker. However, his punch catches nothing but air as Sakura has already recovered and leans back into a backflip kick across Sabeshita's face. It looks like Sakura is really enjoying the fight, but if Sabeshita is really just acting out of loyalty to someone else, then Sakura doesn't believe he will ever be able to beat him. The fight was just about to continue, but then the speaker went off and a voice addresses all the new Furin students rather loudly. Sakura finds it annoying that a perfectly good fight got interrupted, so he wants to keep it going. However, everyone in the class seems to have their attention glued to the speaker, and Sakura finds out why in a moment. The person introduces himself as Hajime Umemiya, the current top dog of Furin Academy, so Sakura is excited that he finally gets to hear from him. However, Umemiya seems to be a lot more clumsy with his words than Sakura expected because he flat out forgets the whole speech he was meant to give. Instead, he just goes on a tangent about how it would be nice to go to the beach and eat some shaved ice, and despite how awkward it is to listen to this, no one can say anything about it because they'll have to deal with Sabeshita. That aside, Umemiya goes on to say he wants everyone to get along, but he knows there are bound to be disagreements between students at some point, so he won't ask that they all become best friends. But surely no one would be dumb enough to start a fight on the first day of school, and suddenly Sabeshita regrets throwing that desk a whole lot. Before he ends his public address, Umemiya has one last thing he wants to say to all the students, even though they probably already know. It is their job to protect the town. The people there trust them to be their shield, so they must live up to their expectations and guard them with everything they have. Sakura is surprised that someone could command so much respect without even being in the room to begin with. He finds it hard to believe that Umemiya was able to foster this kind of solidarity among the students here simply by being a strong fighter, making him even more curious to find out what kind of guy Umemiya really is. Now that the fighting has stopped, Sue slides in and asks if Sakura and Sabeshita are ready to make up yet, but Sakura sees no reason why he should forgive Sabeshita since they haven't settled the score yet, plus Sabeshita was the one who attacked him first to begin with. To mediate, Shuo makes valid arguments that Sakura shouldn't go around holding grudges if he actually wants to make it to the top, and Sabeshita shouldn't have gone and started a fight out of nowhere when he knows Umemiya would not have liked that. So after listening to Suo's logic, Sabeshita stretches his hand out to Sakura for a handshake, and Sakura does the same. Although, that doesn't mean they are friends all of a sudden. As soon as the handshake is done, Sakura gets swarmed by his new classmates, who all want to congratulate him on how amazing he was for being able to land a solid hit on Sabeshita. As Sakura was messing around with his classmates, a guy suddenly bursts in and tells everyone that it's time to head out. Sakura doesn't know what he means by that, and he is even more confused when he ends up having to paint a wall. 30 minutes earlier, after that guy called them all out to the courtyard, Sakura was pissed that he had to leave the classroom right after he got there, but the guy doesn't want to hear it since if they end up being late, then he is going to get yelled at as well. They look over to the edge of the courtyard and spot Haraji yelling at a bunch of students for taking too long to get down here. Sakura recognizes him from the fight yesterday, and Mirai is shocked he actually knows Haraji, so Sakura explains that he has met him when he saved Kotoha from that gang. But as soon as Haraji hears this, he comes racing over and grabs Sakura's face, driving him away to talk in private. Haraji doesn't want Sakura telling anyone that Kotoha was in danger here today, because if Umemiya finds out that Kotoha was in danger, there's going to be hell to pay. And as he says this, he reaches into his jacket pocket, which puts Sakura on edge, but he was just pulling out stomach medicine because he can't handle all the stress dealing with Umemiya causes. Haraji walks away after that, leaving Sakura incredibly confused, and as soon as he returns to Mirai, he is bombarded by questions about what Haraji is like. The only thing Sakura can say about him is that he is pretty weird, which Mirai immediately jots down in his top secret book. Sakura doesn't understand why he cares so much about getting info on Haraji, so Mirai explains that Haraji is one of the 4 Heavenly Kings of Furin Academy under Umemiya, and each Heavenly King has their appointed captains for each class. After explaining how they will be grouped up, Haraji tells them that they are moving out so they should follow him. Sakura still doesn't know what they are even meant to be doing, so he is finally informed that they are going on patrol. Sakura doesn't really have a problem with going on patrol, but he does have a problem with having to do it with Sabeshita. Haraji didn't really want to have to deal with them, but Umemiya asked that he keep an eye on them so they don't start fighting again. Sakura complains that he wasn't the one who started the fight, but Haraji doesn't care at all. After Sakura has calmed down, he asks why they say they are on patrol when this seems a lot like they are just strolling through town. If they are meant to be protecting the town, then Sakura thinks it would be more efficient to go around and look for people who are causing trouble so they can beat them up. Hiraji calls Sakura an idiot for thinking something like that would be effective at reducing crime because that's just raiding. And walking around has its purpose because people knowing that the Furin students are around will keep the smaller groups of troublemakers away. Just then, Hiraji notices an old lady climbing on a rickety old ladder, so he steps in to keep her from breaking her hip, and all of a sudden, the entire group is helping repaint the storefront. Sakura doesn't understand how he ended up doing this, but it's all part of being a member of Furin. Once they are all done painting the walls, they receive many thanks, as well as some delicious snacks for the road. As they leave, Hiraji addresses what Sakura has said earlier about thinking what they were doing is boring, and Hiraji can understand why he thinks that way since he was the same before, but now he has come to learn that being needed can be pretty fun as well. After walking for a while, they end up in an alleyway which gives off a different vibe. It has a dog drawn over it, which Sakura thinks is ugly, but Mirai cautions him not to say things like that so close to the border because they don't know where those guys may be hanging around. This is the territorial border between Bafurin and another group, so they can't cause trouble on the other side of that overpass. Over there, Bafurin's rules mean nothing because they have no jurisdiction. The group is called Shishitoran, and they believe only in absolute power. Mirai said all this with the intent of stopping Sakura from causing trouble, but he only managed to get him more interested. Just then, they notice one of the Furin students being chased down by a couple of people from Shishitoran, but he's on their side of the track, so Hiraji can't get involved. The guy was about to get caught before he could cross back over to Furin territory, but Sakura and Sugishita don't really care about rules, so they both jump in and knock out one of the Shishitoran people. Naraya thinks this is going to cause trouble since they struck Shishitoran students on their turf, but Sakura believes it's only fair that they fight back since Shishitoran clearly attacked one of their own first. However, even though Sakura and Sugishita just laid out one of their people, the others there don't seem to care about what happened to him in the slightest and start shitting on him for losing a fight after just one kick. Just then, someone approaches from behind, and the two Sugishita students immediately have shivers sent down their spines because they know exactly who this is. Joe Togame. He is the second in command at Shishitoran, and he came over here because he heard a commotion, but he is surprised to see one of his people knocked down on the ground, so Hiraji steps up and informs him that the unconscious guy was chasing after one of Furin's people, so they stepped in and stopped what was going on. Once Togame grasps that what happened here was the work of Sugishita and Sakura, his reaction gets Sakura excited since he believes he might get a good fight from this guy. But soon after, the unconscious guy wakes up and begins yelling at Sakura for breaking the rules and interfering in the business of the Shishitoran group. However, as he was going on with his rant, Togame clocks him over the head with a bottle, making him go unconscious again. If there's one thing Togame hates, it's weak losers, and especially those who try to hide behind rules and order, so he starts beating the guy up because he doesn't belong in Shishitoran anymore. It gets so bad that Hiraji has to stop Togame and ask if he is really on the same team as the guy he is beating up. Togame pauses the beating for a second just to say that the guy isn't his teammate anymore. He just lost a ranked match and got demoted to Silver 2, so he is no longer welcome as a member of Shishitoran, which is why Togame is revoking his cool jacket. After listening to everything Togame has to say, Sakura has heard enough and now thinks he is really lame. He beats up the weak so he can call himself strong, so Togame is a huge letdown. Everyone thinks a fight is about to break out, but while Togame is definitely pissed off, he decides that he'll beat Sakura up on a better stage, so he's going to leave for now, but he'll be sure to remember his face. After that is over, Narai starts screaming because Sakura and Sugishita may have just done something that will lead to an all-out war against the Shishitoran people. And if Sakura hadn't provoked him at the end, he may have been a little more forgiving of the attack they did. Hiraji doesn't think that could have happened because Togame isn't as easygoing as he may appear. Among the Shishitoran, he is easily the most territorial, so there's no way he would ever forgive an incident like this. Regardless, Hiraji admits that he should have been the one to step in and save the kid, so he apologizes for not doing anything when it counted. For now, they should all head back to the school so they can report to Yumemiya. Hiraji is dreading having to give the report, which gets Sakura further intrigued to find out what kind of guy Yumemiya actually is. But once they finally get to the roof and meet him, he seems like a really nice guy. Hiraji approaches him and says they've got a problem on their hands, but he says he already knows all about it. That makes no sense since nobody could have told him about what happened yet, but it turns out that he's just talking about his plants. The others are starting to understand why Hiraji hates having to report to Yumemiya now, and it's because he never listens to anything you tell him. Sakura tries to get his attention, but Sagashita gets angry that he would dare try to communicate with his idol, so he was ready to start fighting again, until he remembered Yumemiya is right here and wouldn't approve. They all end up sitting down while Yumemiya explains all the plants he has been growing, when they really should be talking about the real issue here. Sakura can't even tell the difference between the plants anyway, and while he's definitely a good guy, Sakura is more confused than ever about why so many people respect Yumemiya so much. After a while of listening to his plant lecture, the kid who got beat up speaks up and starts explaining what happened today. He says he saw a shoplifter stealing in town, so he chased after the guide, but before he knew it, he had gone too far and ended up in the Lion's Head territory. They were chasing him down and there was no way he could have ever managed to outrun them, but just as he was about to give up, he was saved by Sakura and Sagashita. He admired the Furin students so much that he tried to be like them, but he only ended up sparking a clash with the Lion's Head and getting everyone involved, and for that, he is truly sorry. Yumemiya calls Sasaki by name and tells him thank you for doing what you did. Sure, he may have inadvertently caused a war, but he did it while trying to protect the people of this town, so he has nothing to be sorry for. As for the war, he doesn't have to worry about it since Yumemiya says he will personally handle it. But that aside, he really wants to know how Sakura and Sagashita saved him, so Sasaki explains that they kicked one of the guys off his feet. Yumemiya knows the Lion's Head people won't like that one bit, but he's got to admit that finds it pretty funny. Hiraji apologizes since all this happened while he was meant to be looking after them, but Yumemiya doesn't blame him for it since mistakes happen all the time and Narai rats Sakura out for making things worse by taunting Togame. So Sakura explains that he couldn't stand the fact that Togame was talking about strength being the only thing that was important while only beating him on the weak, so he said it to his face. Yumemiya understands what happened, so he gets up and Sakura thinks he wants to fight, but he actually just gives him a pat on the head and says he was thinking the same thing since those guys have a terrible mindset. On another note, he heard about what Sakura did on Main Street yesterday and today he saved Sasaki, so Yumemiya thanks him for looking out for the people here. Sagashita is jealous that Sakura is getting so much attention and Sakura feels a strange feeling of relaxation from around him. He is starting to understand why people are drawn to him all the time, and that's because he has a presence that would make anyone feel safe. However, Sakura won't let himself give in to that warmth, so he slaps Yumemiya's hand away. Just then, Hiraji gets a call from Kaji, but the only words he can hear him say over the phone are the words Lion's Head before he gets cut off on the phone. Yumemiya asks if something is wrong, but then a moment later they hear someone talking on a megaphone. So they all look down to the courtyard and see a guy dragging the unconscious body of one of the students here. He says he is the leader of Shishitorin, otherwise known as Lion's Head, and his name is Tomiyama Choji. The reason he has come here today and beaten up so many Furin students is because he wants to have a good and clean fight with Yumemiya, and his smile shows just how excited he is for it. Narei is freaking out over the fact that the leader of Lion's Head is here in person, while Sakura is just getting excited because he knows Tomiyama must be stronger than Togame. In that same moment, Sakura feels an unbelievable presence behind him, and he can't tell what it was, so as he sees Yumemiya leaving, he starts following him. The others do the same, and once they are all outside, Yumemiya tells them to stay out of this one. Sakura, as usual, insists on wanting to fight, but Yumemiya just coldly warns him that he doesn't repeat orders twice. Sakura is instantly hit with a sudden wave of obedience because he knows he would have caught a straight punch if he talked back just now, but he has no idea how Yumemiya's entire demeanor could have changed so suddenly. He approaches Tomiyama and calls him out for still holding one of the Furin students by the hair, but Tomiyama simply acknowledges it and laughs straight in Yumemiya's face about what he did. Sakura thinks this guy must be insanely strong, or at least just insane to have the guts to mock Yumemiya to his face like this, and all he really wants right now is to face Yumemiya in a 1 versus 1 since he's got a good excuse for it after what Sakura and Sagashita did. Yumemiya just stands still while Tomiyama circles him, still asking for a fight, but then he speaks up and says that while it may be true that Furin made the first move by knocking out that guy under the bridge, but clearly Tomiyama has done much worse in retaliation, so he thinks they can call it even now. Tomiyama agrees that what he has done is enough to at least call it even for now, but that doesn't mean things have been settled as he throws a kick at Yumemiya's face. Yumemiya caught it, but Tomiyama wasn't actually going for a sneak attack, he just wanted to start another conflict if he has a reason to fight Yumemiya. It doesn't make any sense why he wants to fight so badly, so Yumemiya asks what his goal is in doing all this. Tomiyama answers that it's not necessarily because he wants to fight, but rather he wants Yumemiya. Over at Lion's Head, it has been really lonely for him, ever since he became the top dog, but Yumemiya, on the other hand, has no shortage of friends to have fun with, so Tomiyama came up with a rational solution to come here and take over all of Furin so he can have fun too. Yumemiya can sympathize Tomiyama's point of view, but before he could even attempt to talk things out with him, some other members of Lion's Head show up, and while Tomiyama is confused why they are here since he didn't call for backup, they tell him that it was a bad idea to go assaulting Furin High on his own like this. Sakura and the others walk forward to join Yumemiya, and even though he tries to get them to back off again, Sakura stands his ground because while he can respect a duel, he won't stand for a jumping. Tomiyama is getting frustrated since he was just about to get a proper duel with Yumemiya, so he wants everyone else to leave already. But Togame doesn't think a duel is really going to work out today, especially when they've got the entire student body staring them down at the moment. Yumemiya sees what's about to happen, so he yells for everyone in the classes to stay where they are as he steps forward, saying he will take Tomiyama on in a duel like he wanted. He just wants him to tell the others to stand down so things don't get messy. Tomiyama is glad to finally get his match, but then one of the Lion's Head kids begins mocking Yumemiya for being such a softie, and this sets off Sagasha, who can't stand any Yumemiya slander. Another one tries mocking Suo for looking so plain that he needs to wear accessories to stand out, but with how he's holding his hands in the anime girl pose, Suo just thinks he is cute. Togame says everyone should calm down for a bit, and then he tells Tomiyama that even if he wants to have a duel, he should save it for another day since it's already getting dark. And if they start fighting in the dark, they won't be able to admire how badly they beat down the Furin students. Sakura retorts, saying the only one getting their faces smashed in is gonna be Togame, and since Tomiyama can see that there is clearly some tension between these two, he suggests that they make the duel a team match instead. They can have a bunch of one-on-one battles, and the combatants are going to be Yumemiya and Tomiyama, Togame and Sakura, Sagasha and this guy, and finally Suo and the kawaii boy. Yumemiya protests, saying that if it's a duel he wants, and the two of them should be enough. But Tomiyama now wants it to be a tournament because that sounds like way more fun to him. Sakura and the others agree to the terms of the tournament, but at the last moment, one more guy from Lion's Head comes out and asks to join in because he wants to take on Haraji, and Haraji seems to have some beef with him. So he accepts the challenge and joins the tournament as well. Since everything has been settled, Tomiyama says he will be putting the Lion's Head team on the line for this, so everyone should do their best and have fun. Later, the guys head over to the cafe to get some food and relax, and Narai is freaking out because he thinks the situation is really, really bad for them. Sakura is getting tired of all of Narai's complaining, but he is the reason all this started in the first place. Kotoha brings over some food and tells Narai that there's no point in getting so stressed about it all since it won't change what happens, but Narai has good reason to be worried, since if by some horrible turn of events, Yumemiya were to actually lose, then Boffurin may cease to exist altogether. Konoha still maintains her point that worrying about things won't change anything either way, but you should know better than anyone that these guys aren't so weak that they would lose to Lion's Head so easily. Sakura scarfs down his food insanely fast, and once he is done eating, he asks if he can leave for the day. Narai is shocked that he finished so fast, but they are meant to be waiting for Yumemiya and Haraji to show up since they had to stay back and convince the rest of the Furin students not to do anything that would complicate matters further. Sakura understands that, but he doesn't know why they have to meet up here of all places, so Suo explains that this is somewhat of a hangout spot for Furin, and they usually gather here before big fights happen. Just then, Yumemiya comes bursting through the door and immediately begins fawning over Kotoha. Sakura thinks this must mean that she is Yumemiya's girlfriend, but they both immediately deny that. Yumemiya instead asserts that Kotoha is his darling little sister, but Kotoha denies this as well, leaving Sakura confused about what their actual relationship is. Kotoha is embarrassed to say this, but she explains that both she and Yumemiya were raised in the same orphanage, and Yumemiya just one-sidedly decided that she was his little sister at one point. Sakura doesn't find the situation all that weird, but he is a little shocked to find out that she is the little sister here. She says she is only 16, but he was sure that she was at least 20 or something since she acts so mature. But as he says this, he gets a chair thrown at him by Sagasha, which gets on his nerves, but what really scares him is the way Yumemiya is looking at him like he was just about to do a lot worse to Sakura. He laughs it off, and Hiraji reminds Sakura that he must never let Yumemiya know that Kotoha was ever in danger or hell's going to break loose. A little while later, Yumemiya is enjoying his meal, but Hiraji seems to be lost in thought about something. He has been thinking about the former top dog of Lion's Head, and that gets Sakura wondering if Lion's Head used to be different from how it is now. They believe in strength alone, and they certainly had a bunch of hotheads on their team, but they would have never done something as cowardly as chasing a middle schooler to beat him up. Fury even had an all-out brawl with Lion's Head once, but it was oddly satisfying for everyone involved. However, since Tomiyama took over, things have gone downhill with him picking fights all over the place, and they've never been the same since then. Yumemiya thinks it has to be Tomiyama's fault, although he's not sure about the specifics, but if they fight tomorrow, then they'll be able to find out since punches are sometimes the only way guys like them can communicate. Closing time rolls around, so Kotoha closes up shop and everyone is about to head home, but before they leave, Sasaki takes a moment to formally thank Sakura for stepping up to save him when he was in trouble, to which Sakura gets embarrassed again. By the next morning, they all arrive at the bridge and head into the Lion's Head territory for the tournament, and Tomiyama and the other Lion's Head members were all waiting to get things started. Since all the participants are here, Tomiyama excitedly tells them to follow him so that they can get things started. As Sakura and the others walk along the streets, he notices that Lion's Head's turf is made up almost exclusively of bars, so Mirai explains that this place is the biggest bar district in the area, and it is said to be really lively at night, but also pretty seedy. That information was useful and all, but now that Sakura thinks about it, why is Mirai here in the first place? He can't fight, so he has no reason to follow them to the tournament. Mirai argues that he was present during the initial brawl that started this whole thing, so he is just as much involved as they are. And besides, he is still a member of Boffurin, so even if he can't protect others like they do, he wants to at least be able to protect himself. So to do that, he wants to learn as much as possible from them. Sakura blushes a little and says Mirai can do whatever he wants, but Hiraji thinks they are taking this tournament not seriously enough considering it will decide the fate of Boffurin as a whole, but Yumemiya doesn't think it's worth worrying about because from what he can tell, they are pretty dependable. Since they were falling behind, Tomiyama comes back to tell them to keep up with the group. Eventually, they all arrive at their destination, so Togame officially welcomes them to the Lion's Head base. This place is an old abandoned movie theater that Lion's Head took over, so they now call it the Cage. And once the Furin guys make it to the stage room, they find themselves completely surrounded by an audience of Lion's Head members, and Mirai is starting to regret his decision to follow the others here, because the odds of them getting jumped just flew through the roof. Sakura tells Mirai not to show any signs of fear and look forward since he said he wants to learn. Meanwhile, Tomiyama steps out in front of the crowd and starts getting them hyped up about the duels that are set to begin soon. And while he does that, Yumemiya talks to the guys and tells them that this may have turned into a whole tournament, but the main event is still going to be the fight between Yumemiya and Tomiyama, so the rest of their fights won't have much of an effect on the bet that was made, meaning it doesn't matter if they win or lose. However, it matters a lot to Sakura since he doesn't plan on losing to anyone here, and neither do the rest of them. Yumemiya is glad to have such dependable friends to support him, but as he turns to face the stage, Tomiyama is calling out to him so they can start fighting immediately. However, Togame interrupts and says they can't start the tournament with the bosses of each group since that is just poor entertainment planning. So instead, this guy asks if he can go first since Sagisha has been staring at him with rage in his eyes for a while now, and it's starting to really piss him off. On Sagisha's end, Yumemiya tells him that he's fine with him fighting in the first rounds, so he turns around to follow the guy onto the stage. But before he walks out, Sakura gets his attention and tells him that they still got their own score to settle with a rematch. But Sakura would never want to fight someone who would lose to these losers, so basically he is telling Sagisha to try his best to win. Sagisha doesn't respond and just turns away instead without saying a word. The fight is finally about to begin with Sagisha and Arima facing each other head to head. Meanwhile, in the audience, Mirai is going through his book of fighters and he finds a record of Arima once having broken several ribs of a guy he was fighting, all with a single punch. That punch must have had some insane power behind it, but Sue doesn't seem worried since Sagisha is pretty similar in terms of capabilities. However, Yumemiya doesn't think it's fair to lump Sagisha and Arima together since they are nothing alike. On stage, Arima can tell that Sagisha is filled with rage and just waiting for the match to start, so he decides to use that to his advantage and looks over to Yumemiya, before yelling his name out as if something is wrong. Due to Sagisha's Yumemiya fixation, he was obligated to look to make sure his idol was okay. But as soon as gaze was averted, Arima immediately ran forward and punched him square in the face while mocking him for being dumb enough to look away during a fight. However, Sagisha is still standing after taking a straight punch while he was off guard, so Sakura and Yumemiya aren't really worried about the fight. Arima still seems to think he is on the winning side of this fight, but once Sagisha grabs his arm, I'm sure Arima started regretting his prior decision a lot. Sagisha is enraged that Arima would dare use Yumemiya's name as part of such a dirty trick, so he palms Arima's face and slams his body into the floor so hard that he now identifies as a floorboard. The crowd has gone silent as they just witnessed one of their own get completely violated, so they all start chattering amongst themselves because they know they ain't built strong enough to take a hit like that. There's a serious mood in the theater, but the silence is broken up when Tomiyama begins to clap for Sagisha's flawless victory. Togame has a cold and calculating look on his face, which is heavily contrasted by Tomiyama's excitement to get a chance to fight someone as strong as that. He pulls Tomiyama back into his seat and tells him to just behave himself and wait for his turn. Mirai can't believe how little concern Tomiyama and Togame are showing for Arima after he just got beaten, and they are even praising his opponent for being strong on top of that, so he knows these guys have a few screws loose in the head. Sagisha returns to his seat and is welcomed back by Yumemiya, who congratulates him on his overwhelming victory, but it's not like he expected any other outcome from someone as sturdy as him. Narai is still in awe of the durability Sagisha has to be able to tank a punch like that and keep going, but Sakura isn't surprised since he already expected as much since he has fought Sagisha before. But it's not like he respects him as a fighter or anything. Yumemiya is glad things are going well, but then he looks over at Togame and Tomiyama, and Togame seems like he's thinking hard about something. After a moment, both he and Tomiyama get up so they can start the next round, but before any of that can happen, Tomiyama calls over two random guys from the audience and tells them to go dispose of Arima's body so he doesn't have to look at it anymore. They do as they are instructed and drag his body off stage, but they give up on carrying him backstage, so they just drop his body on the floor since they can't be bothered to be nice to him. He always acted like he was really tough around them, but now look at him, laid out on the floor and looking goofy. After kicking him in the face, they start walking off, but Sakura can't stand the sound of them talking about strength, so he tells them to keep their mouths shut until they can understand what real strength is. The two guys take offense to this and start picking a fight with Sakura, but Sue tells him there's no point in wasting his breath talking with them because those kinds of people will never understand unless they get a good punch to the face. One of the guys then grabs Sue's jacket and is about to fight him, but Tomiyama organized a set of predetermined fights for today, and he's not going to let some nameless background character ruin that for him, so he tells the guy to back off. They are stricken with fear, so they do as he says, and now that order has been restored, Tomiyama asks for the next battle to begin. Sakura wants to go next, but Sue tells him that it would make more sense for him to go next with the current order of things, so he calls over to Kanuma so they can begin their fight. As Kanuma walks towards the stage, Sue gets up to go as well, but before he leaves, he addresses Sakura and tells him that he thought Sakura's goal of becoming the top dog at Furin was stupid when he first heard it. Sakura thinks he's trying to start a fight with him, but Sue goes on to state that he has changed his mind after he saw that Sakura's words had genuine motivation behind them, so now he thinks Sakura is pretty cool. That's why he is going to work hard so Sakura doesn't surpass him so easily. As the fight is about to begin, Sakura asks Narai if he has any information on Suo, so Narai looks in his book. But while it says he is famously strong, there isn't any specific data on how he became so strong or who he has beaten before. It's the same with everyone else too, as they've heard a lot of talk about Suo, but they don't actually know how he fights. Kanuma is biting his fingernails in anger over what the Furin students have done to Arima, and Suo is surprised that he can actually feel compassion for another person, but he is only angry about what happened to Arima because they've been together for a long time, but now that he has been eliminated, his career in Lion's Head is ruined. Suo finds it childish to only make a fuss for someone else's sake when you are personally affected. His taunting gets to Kanuma, so he charges at him, but Suo calmly grabs his hand and parries his punch with ease. Kanuma is confused about what just happened since he can tell that Suo's movements just now were completely reactive, so he comes up with a bright idea to just punch faster so that Suo can't react in time to dodge. However, that doesn't go so well for him, and he ends up on his back looking goofy in front of everyone. He tries to regain some of his dignity and grabs Suo's leg for another attack, but he just gets himself thrown to the floor once more. The embarrassment is getting worse and worse as Suo is now lecturing him while he's on the floor, so he tries attacking again. But as expected, Suo uses his momentum against him once more and makes him hit the ground. The Lion's Head crowd begins yelling obscenities at Kanuma because they think he isn't taking this fight seriously, but he is actually trying as hard as he can right now. Sakura realizes that under that fake smile, Suo is actually pretty heartless when he wants to be. He already knew Kanuma was weaker than him, but rather than take him out quickly and let it be done with, is making a mockery of him. Kanuma probably feels like he would rather be dead than keep fighting Suo like this, but Suo probably had his own grudges against Lion's Head, so this is his way of taking out his anger on them, although Hiraji never expected him to be so emotional about it. But then again, he could just be showing him off because Sakura is watching. Over on stage, Kanuma just missed a punch that had him stumbling across the entire stage, but after catching his breath, he goes back in for another attack, only to miss more of his punches and get pushed back. He tries kicking Suo, but that just gets him a first-class ticket back to the floor. He gets points for resilience since he keeps fighting, but with how much he has been kissing the floor this entire fight, he may want to consider just staying down. The Lion's Head people have now completely turned on Kanuma, and he knows what's going to happen to him if they view him as weak, and after seeing the look of disappointment on Togame's face, he throws a tantrum and gets back up to try and attack Suo. However, that doesn't work out in his favor as Suo throws a kick but stops inches away from his face. He then tells Kanuma that he knows exactly what he is thinking about right now. He is imagining himself in the exact same position as the people he had made fun of, and he probably doesn't like it. Suo tells him that this is a first great step towards his reform as a compassionate person, but the next step is to beat it into him so he doesn't forget what it feels like to be a loser. But before Suo can do that, Togame tells him to stop since the fight is already over, and he doesn't want Kanuma disgracing them any further. In fact, to make sure they don't have to deal with his dumbass anymore, Togame officially kicks him out of the Lion's Head, so he has lost everything in one fight. Suo is satisfied with what he has done to Kanuma, so he walks off stage, leaving him with a reminder of how important it is to be compassionate towards others. While Suo leaves, the audience of Lion's Head are left silent from the violations they just witnessed, and even more so from the fact that Suo is only a first year in Furin, so they are starting to realize that they can't afford to mess with Boffurin. Yumiya congratulates Suo on such an overwhelming victory, while also complimenting him for being strong, but Suo doesn't think of himself as all that impressive. Narei, on the other hand, couldn't be more impressed as he has never seen someone move like Suo. He asks if it was Kung Fu or some other type of martial arts, but Suo can't really answer that question since he doesn't know. His instructor was self-taught, so he kind of mixed in a bit of all the martial arts. That aside, Hiraji mentions how surprising it was to see Suo acting so emotional, and he is a bit embarrassed that he went so far as to humiliate Kanuma, but he says he did it because of Sakura. Sakura doesn't want to be blamed for Suo's actions, but he does warn Suo that he had better take the fight seriously if he ever fights with him. Narei is finding it a little repetitive that all Sakura can think about is fighting everyone, but Suo doesn't really want to fight with him since he thinks Sakura would be a pain to deal with in a real fight. Hearing this, Sakura loses his temper and almost jumps on Suo. So Narei has to use all his might to hold him back, and Yumiya is just glad that everyone is getting along well, if you can call this getting along anyway. Just then, they notice Kanuma, who is in the process of dragging his best friend's unconscious body across the floor, and he looks like a completely broken man. Once Arima finally regains consciousness, he looks over to Kanuma, who seems like he's on the verge of going crazy, so he crawls over to him and asks if he lost his fight as well. The only words Kanuma can bring himself to say are it's over, because now that they've both lost fights in front of all the members of Lion's Head, they'll be punching bags for everyone else from now on. Tomiyama is still as excited as ever, so he now wants to fight Suo as well, but Togame wants things to go in order, so he asks who wants to go up next for their fight. Sakura finally thinks it's his time to shine, but as he stands up and turns to Togame so they can head onto the stage, someone else stands up and he points straight at Hiraji because he wants to fight him next. Hiraji still has beef he wants to settle as well, so he apologizes to Sakura because he needs to take the next fight. Sakura isn't having it since both of the other first years got their chance to fight, so there's no reason his turn should be skipped over. Hiraji brings up the fact that Sakura is meant to be fighting Togame, but he doesn't look like he is ready to fight yet, so Sakura needs to wait a little longer. Since Togame is the second in command at Lion's Head, normally it would be Hiraji's job to fight him, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have faith that Sakura could win. The compliment immediately quells Sakura's anger at Hiraji, but he's still pissed at the other guy for cutting in line and calling Hiraji out like that. Narei thinks the guy may know Hiraji from somewhere, but none of them know why they have beef since Hiraji doesn't talk about himself much. Meanwhile, as Sako is making his way up on stage, Tomiyama wishes him good luck in his fight, but Togame is a little condescending and asks if something happened between him and Hiraji since Sako usually never gets into fights willingly, but he just ignores Togame and keeps walking. Once the two were standing across from each other, Hiraji starts a conversation by saying Sako has grown since the last time they saw each other, but it's a shame he's in Lion's Head now since this fight is unavoidable at this point. Sako remains silent throughout, and Tomiyama is bored of all the talking, so he yells for them to start fighting already. Since they're starting, Hiraji puts his hands up and Sako immediately charges at him with a flurry of punches and kicks, but Hiraji is able to expertly block them all. Sako keeps piling on the pressure with his attacks, but at the end of his combo, no damage has been done to Hiraji. Sako backs off for a bit and tells Hiraji that he shouldn't look down on him like he used to, since the Sako he once knew is gone, and he's going to prove it here. He charges back in with a frontal kick and Hiraji counterattacks as well, but neither of them seem to be making any headway in the fight, as neither have landed a decisive blow yet. Then, in the middle of one kick, Sako grabs his own leg and redirects the kick, narrowly missing Hiraji's face, and Hiraji is really impressed. Narai is panicking because Hiraji is on the defensive and Lion's Head is really rooting for Sako to take down Hiraji. Even Togame is amazed by how good Sako's fighting skills are, but Tomiyama doesn't think it is all that strange since he personally appointed Sako as one of his 5 fingers. Togame has to admit that while he may not understand Sako as a person, he has fought the most out of everyone here and even nearly burnt himself out when he first joined Lion's Head. Back to the stage, Sako is still dodging Hiraji's attacks, but he's taking the time to call them out for lacking any flair in his attack pattern and solely relying on raw strength. According to Sako, Hiraji hasn't changed one bit, but Hiraji can tell that Sako has changed quite a bit, especially with how talkative he is being right now. He remembers Sako never speaking a word the whole time he was teaching him how to fight, but Hiraji bringing up the past annoys Sako and makes him charge at Hiraji one more time, but now he has sped up quite a bit. So much so that he manages to catch Hiraji off guard and knock him back with a kick to the face. Everyone is shocked to see Hiraji knocked out so easily, and Sako is standing over his body, wondering when Hiraji got so weak. He blames Hiraji's weakness on hanging out with all these Furin clowns, and Sakura starts getting angry, but not at Sako, but rather at Hiraji for letting himself get dropped so easily. Sue finds the whole thing's funny, but more so because Sakura is starting to care for his friends more and more. Sakura gets embarrassed by Sue's assessment and says he was just pissed because Sako was making fun of them, but Yumemiya then speaks up and tells them all to calm down because it's not over yet. He then addresses Sako and reminds him that Hiraji is one of the 4 divas of Boffurin, and specifically, he is their Taman, so he asks if Sako knows what else a Taman is called. Sako doesn't understand the point of such a stupid question, but once a hand lands on his shoulder, he is shocked to see that Hiraji is back on his feet and as active as ever. He hasn't gotten kicked like that in a while, so he really felt it, but he knows it must have made him look really lame. He acknowledges that Sako has gotten really strong since he last saw him, almost like he's an entirely new person. But as the Taman of Boffurin, he's got to show off a little bit, so he takes his stomach medicine and gets ready for round 2. We get a flashback to Hiraji and Sako's middle school days, and Sako was getting cornered by bullies at the time. He'd just been minding his own business and getting good grades, but these bullies were high-level haters, so they weren't going to just let him do well in peace. They all start beating him up, but then Hiraji showed up to save the day. Back to the current fight has become a slugfest, with each side taking punches as well as dishing them out, and the crowd is stone-faced with amazement at what they are witnessing, and even Sakura can't believe how strong Hiraji is. Sue tells Sakura that Hiraji has to be strong to have earned a spot as one of Boffurin's divas, and pretty much everyone in town knows he's incredibly strong. But even if he was strong to begin with, Sue is sure that he kicked it up a notch because of Sakura. The fight goes on, and while things still look pretty balanced, Hiraji now has the upper hand and ends up heel-kicking the focus out of Sako's eyes. Sako can't understand how Hiraji is still so strong compared to him after all that training he went through to improve himself, especially since he has been living the easy life with his friends here. We get another flashback to Sako's middle school days right after Hiraji had just finished beating up the bullies, but he didn't understand why Hiraji went out of his way to help him. Hiraji doesn't think he needs much of a reason to help someone who is being ganged up on, but he tells Sako that he needs to learn to stick up for himself because that's the only way that he'll be able to deal with bullies like these. He offers him a hand so that he can stand back up, but that's when Sako grabs his sleeve and pleads with Hiraji to teach him how to fight. Hiraji agreed, and since then, Sako trained with him and held a great deal of respect towards him. Even though he never really tried to form one, people just seemed to flock to him due to his strength, and Sako was one of those people who were proud to follow him. But then on the day Hiraji graduated from middle school, Sako was glazing Hiraji for getting into Furin and was sure that he would stand above everyone there. But all that glaze became too much for even Hiraji to bear, so he tells Sako not to follow him. He already knows that once he gets to Furin, he's going to be under this guy named Yumemiya, so he can't meet Sako's expectations of him. He wanted Sako to find an actual goal for himself instead of being his fanboy. Sako couldn't understand what just happened with his idol essentially abandoning him. So he went and took out his frustrations by beating up a local gang by himself. And while he was standing there among the bodies, he was approached by Togame and Tomiyama, who were impressed by his capabilities, so they offered him a spot on their team. Sako asked if they have strong people on their team, and Togame confirmed it, stating that their policy is that strength means everything. So the stronger you are, the higher up you'll be able to get. However, Sako doesn't care about any of the hierarchy stuff and just wants to fight with strong people so that he can get stronger and make Hiraji regret abandoning him. Which is why he refuses to lose to him in this fight. Unlike Hiraji, he hasn't been spending time making friends, but rather he has been improving himself so that he can be stronger than Hiraji. He runs forward and tries to attack Hiraji from below, so Hiraji counters with a punch only to get faked out by Sako, who does a backflip over him and gets ready to land a punch. However, he met with a boot to the face since Hiraji did not fall for his trick. Sako's feet are wobbling after that kick, but he still refuses to lose to someone who is satisfied not being at the top. He tries throwing another punch. At this time, Hiraji just catches it and apologizes to Sako for not being able to live up to his expectations. And immediately after, he delivers a hit punch so powerful that it gets Sako to start doing some really deep soul-searching about why he was so angry. He knew that Hiraji was looking out for him when he said he should find a new goal for himself, but he was just being selfish. He didn't want to hear Hiraji tell him to not follow him because all he wanted to do was stay by Hiraji's side no matter what. He didn't care if he wasn't the top dog or something because all he wanted was for Hiraji to ask him to follow him. Sako collapses on the ground, so Hiraji is the clear victor of the match and everyone is still in shock from the spectacle they just witnessed. Although Togame wastes no time in getting up and calling for someone to go drag Sako's body off the stage because he lost, but after seeing how well Sako fought, they all have too much respect for him to do something so disrespectful. And to help his friend out, Hiraji offers to carry Sako off stage, lifting him onto his shoulders and gently dropping him on the floor. Togame half-heartedly thanks Hiraji for helping, but he mentions that he didn't need to be so gentle with the body of a loser. And since Sako lost, he's going to be revoking his lion's head jacket. But Hiraji grabs his hand to stop him and says he should probably wait until after his match to criticize people for losing since he doesn't know what might happen. And before Hiraji leaves, he gives Togame some advice that running his team like he is doing now won't help make them stronger. He walks back to his seat and Yumemiya congratulates him on his victory. But Hiraji is surprised that he isn't asking about Sako and what the story is between them. Yumemiya knows Hiraji probably doesn't want to talk about it, so he doesn't want to bother Hiraji by asking now. He can tell him the full story when he feels like it, but for now, they should just focus on watching the next fight. Togame is having a flashback to a dark time in his life, but he gets snapped out of it when he gets called up for his turn to fight, so he turns to Sakura, who is as ready as ever to throw down. As the fight is about to begin, the Lion's Head members seem to be way more excited about this one than the other three they've seen. Sakura steps out onto the stage and all his friends give him words of encouragement. Yumemiya reminds Sakura that fights are like a form of conversation, so he should enjoy it, but Sakura isn't so sure he agrees with Yumemiya's definition of a fight. However, with that said, he can't deny that he feels something when he fights a strong opponent, but he can't find the words to describe what it is, so he's just going to ignore it for now and focus on taking down Togame. Togame slowly walking onto the stage, and he can tell that Sakura is impatient, so he starts telling him that he doesn't always need to be in such a rush all the time. Going fast can be great sometimes, but at times like these, Togame likes to take it slow and enjoy himself. They both get into combat stance, waiting for the other person to make a move, and Sakura is the first to strike with an overhand punch. However, Togame counters and pushes him to the ground. But before he could finish the knockout, Sakura uses his leg to break free. As he watches, Hiraji thinks to himself how he has learnt that Sakura is a really skilled fighter who could take anyone on over the past 3 days, but Togame isn't just any random fighter. He is the second in command of a group that values strength above all else, so he's on another level. Sakura taunts Togame for moving pretty fast despite preaching about going slow, but Togame is surprised that Sakura thinks this is fast. Togame can go a lot faster, but he's taking his time so he can fight Sakura longer. Sakura is up for the challenge and tells Togame to come at him with everything he's got, so Togame charges in and attempts to grapple Sakura, only to get countered. So far, all Sakura has been able to do is run and dodge because Togame is simply outpacing him. Mirai is starting to get a little worried for Sakura's safety, since he is barely keeping up with Togame, but Yumemiya expected as much from him since he has been at the top of Lion's Head for a while now and no one has come close to taking his number 2 spot. That means Togame is on a totally different level, but Yumemiya is still confident that Sakura will find a way to come out on top. Togame is incredibly fast, but little by little, Sakura is getting used to his speed until finally he is able to dodge Togame and land a kick on the back of his head. However, that doesn't stop him as he pushes himself back up and praises Sakura for finally getting on his level. Right before he grabs Sakura's leg and slams him to the floor, he was able to stomp him out with the lethal wooden slippers, but Sakura rolls out of the way in time. Togame takes some time to tell Sakura that the way he talks pisses him off, and after he starts trying to stomp him out again. Sakura attempts to counter him by grabbing his legs, but Togame counters his counter and slams his face into the ground. Lion's Head is ecstatic that their leader is beating up Sakura, and when Togame goes to continue the fight with Sakura, he finds that Sakura is already out cold, so he's a little disappointed. He calls Sakura lame for acting all self-righteous earlier when he doesn't have the strength to back it up. He goes on to say that Sakura probably just has confidence because he is surrounded by strong people, but when he's by himself, he can't do a single thing. Sakura wakes up because he can't stand listening to Togame anymore, but as he throws a punch at him, Togame easily dodges it. However, that wasn't the main attack, as Sakura then grabs his arm and twists it to get himself free. Once he's back on his feet, he charges at Togame again, and this time he is quick enough to catch Togame with a double kick to the face. He admits that he may be surrounded by good people now, but Togame thinks that Sakura only got this far by hiding in a friend group. All while he was shunned and rejected his whole life, then Sakura believes there's no way Togame will ever beat him. Sakura attacks again, and he now has Togame on the ropes trying to keep up with him. No one can believe how much better Sakura has gotten in such a short time to be able to push Togame back like this, and he keeps piling on the pressure. Sakura yells that if he wins this fight, then Togame will have to admit that Lion's Head's philosophy of only strength mattering is stupid. Sakura then kicks Togame straight across the face and sends him stumbling back. But that last statement Sakura made about Lion's Head's philosophy being stupid pissed Togame off to a whole new degree, so he regains his footing and proceeds to evict the soul right out of Sakura's body with a kick he delivers to his chest. Sakura is gasping for air on the ground while Togame walks up to him and says he knows nothing of what Lion's Head is about. Their philosophy is there to make everyone aim for new heights in strength. Meanwhile, Sakura is just here playing his hero game. Sakura's face gets smashed into the floor and doesn't look like he'll be getting up this time, so the Lion's Head members begin cheering for their captain. Nurei is really worried for Sakura's safety, but Sue doesn't think Sakura is out for the count just yet. Sakura raises his head from the floor, telling Togame that his philosophy may sound nice when he says it out loud, but in practice, it's nothing more than bullying one another for no reason. Togame doesn't want to listen to Sakura's yelling anymore, so he raises his leg to make sure he knocks him out with the next stomp. But Sakura goes on about how there is nothing honorable about beating people who have already lost the fight up, or chasing down middle schoolers to beat them up. Togame's foot comes down, but he didn't hit Sakura because he just realized something. He has no idea about what happened that day, but it all makes sense now since he figured that Furin would never cause trouble for no reason. He walks off stage to confront the two that were there on the day of the incident and asks them to explain exactly what they were doing before he got there. They admit that they did see the middle schoolers, but they try to pass off the bullying as a game they were playing. However, Togame is not dumb and starts beating both of them up for dishonoring the Lion's Head name with their dumbassery. He then strips them of their jackets to make a statement that they are not welcome here anymore, but Tomiyama wants him to finish his fight with Sakura and leave the disciplinary action for later. Togame stays silent, but he does as Tomiyama wants and returns to the stage where Sakura has finally managed to get back on his feet, and he apologizes for keeping him waiting, but he's ready to continue the fight now. We get a flashback to a particular festival night when Togame was cornered in a back alley by 4 Lion's Head dudes. Although they were the ones getting their asses beaten since Togame was so far above their level. After taking them out, he saw that a bunch more of them were coming this way, so he's going to have to beat them up as well, but before he sends more of them to the hospital. Tomiyama showed up and was really amazed with how strong Togame was, so while ignoring the bodies of his fallen comrades, he invites Togame to join Lion's Head. At the time, Tomiyama had just recently joined as well, but he was sure that Togame will fit right in with the rest of the people there. He still couldn't wrap his head around why Tomiyama would invite him after he literally beat up a ton of his teammates, but Tomiyama didn't give him any time to think and drag him off to the Lion's Head base. Togame ended up joining, and little by little, he grew to love the Lion's Head group, and it was all because of Tomiyama. Then one day, while nothing in particular was happening, Tomiyama got bored and went looking for Togame to ask him if he knows what it means to believe strength is everything. Togame already knew all about it since it was mentioned on the first day he joined Lion's Head. That doesn't stop Tomiyama from talking about it again. He believes it means never yielding to anyone and making a vow to assert yourself, so strength gives you a ton of freedom. A while after that, some of the older Lion's Head members were talking about how the new recruits are doing an amazing job. Just the other day, Togame and Tomiyama raided a rival gang's base all by themselves, and the two of them completely decimated everyone there. After they were done with that, they returned to the rest of their group, and it looks like the only reason they attacked the rival gang was to get revenge for what they did to Kanuma. The others can't believe they actually took them on by themselves. But Tomiyama couldn't back down from a challenge like this because he aims to become the coolest person in the world. Togame explains that Tomiyama believes strength is meant to be freeing, so he's trying to become free by achieving overwhelming strength. He says he and Togame are in a race to see who can become the most free person, and he invites everyone to join him on his quest for true freedom. Togame was never good at driving with people, but at least when he was with Tomiyama, he could fit in with the group. He really had fun, so he thought that if Tomiyama became the leader, then the whole group would become better as a result, but he turned out to be wrong. After Tomiyama became the leader and achieved his goal of becoming the strongest and by extension, the most free he has ever been, he realized that it's lonely at the top, so he wanted to try making the whole team as strong as he was so that he could have equals around him. Togame was a bit taken aback by this sudden statement, but he assumes Tomiyama just wants to train everyone to become as strong as possible, so it may not be a bad idea. However, when some members come running up to tell their leaders that one of their guys got jumped, while Togame's first instinct was to get ready to go avenge the guy, Tomiyama takes a different route and attacks the guy who already got jumped. He says the reason he did that is because the guy got beaten, which means he must be weak, and the weak don't deserve to be a part of Lion's Head. Tomiyama then turned to Togame for approval, and this was when Togame realized he never should have made Tomiyama the leader. He tries to explain that what he is proposing won't make the team stronger and all, but Tomiyama wasn't in the mood to listen. He is currently the leader, which means he is the one who makes the rules, and if Togame can't accept his rules, he is free to get out of Lion's Head. Togame realized there was no changing Tomiyama's mind, but he still looked up to him, so he asked to add one condition. He will say what Tomiyama is thinking and be the one to take the jackets from the people Tomiyama wants gone, so he asks that he keep smiling like he usually does since he can't have his role model become a dictator. Togame chose to sully his own image to preserve Tomiyama's, all in the hope that he would one day come back to his senses. Back to the present, Togame's fight with Sakura is still going on, but while Sakura is currently winning, he can tell that Togame isn't giving this fight everything he's got anymore. Togame doesn't want to admit it, but he knows he has lost the motivation to keep going, so he wonders what he is even trying to accomplish anymore. Sakura picked this fight with Togame because he believed he knew everything he needed to know about him being a scumbag, yet when he found out that those two were bullying a middle schooler under that bridge, he beat them up over it. So Sakura wants to keep this fight going so he can find out what Togame's real intentions are. He asks Togame directly why he got angry at the actions of Kanuma and the other guy, when the slogan of Lion's Head is that strength means you can do whatever you want. Togame laughs and agrees that Lion's Head is the home of the strong, but that doesn't mean it is the home of scum like them. He has had to take the jackets off of more and more scumbags to try and keep Lion's Head the same as it was before, so when the incident with Boffurin happened, he told Tomiyama because he thought it could be the spark that changes his views on strength. And in doing so, he ended up dragging everyone into such an unnecessary fight, but things have gone too far out of hand for him to stop now. The Lion's Head he sees before him is a shell of the one he once knew, so now when Sakura asks him what he wants to do, he is seriously considering just moving to the mountains. Sakura calls Togame out for daydreaming about stupid stuff and talking about morals when he has done such scummy things already. Sakura admits that Togame is strong, but that doesn't change the fact that the way he acts is totally lame, so Sakura is going to beat him until he realizes his mistake. And once he does that, Togame will finally be cool enough for Sakura to want to fight him. Togame just laughs since Sakura is talking a lot for someone who was getting beat up a few minutes ago, but Sakura doesn't care because no matter how strong his opponent is, he will never back down from them. And he'll never change his mind. After hearing this, Togame is sent into the flashback where he gave in to Tomiyama's deluded understanding of what strength is supposed to be, and he gets so distracted by it that Sakura manages to catch him with a kick to the neck. Togame finally understands where he went wrong, so he is laughing to himself about it and turns around to punch Sakura in the face. That punch hurt, but Sakura is glad to see that Togame is finally taking their fight seriously. Togame has a newfound respect for Sakura, so he takes off his shoes and unties his hair because he wants to face Sakura with every punch of strength he has got, and that's exactly what Sakura likes to hear. Their fight becomes far more intense than it was before, and the crowd is left in stunned silence because despite the sheer brutality being displayed, both Sakura and Togame seem to be smiling. Togame is getting a lot of good hits in on Sakura, but none of them were enough to keep him down, and Sakura is equally dealing a decent amount of damage to him. The other Furin members knew Sakura was a good fighter, but they had no idea he was this good, and while they are all watching in amazement, Tomiyama is blankly staring at how much fun both of them are having with the fight. Sakura admits he thought of Togame as a jackass before, but right now, he's having the most enjoyable fight of his life, and part of the reason it is so fun is because Togame actually respects him as a person. Sakura's punch gets dodged, and Togame connects with a gut punch that has Sakura doing the jaunty walk, but Sakura still looks annoyingly happy regardless. And moreover, his movements are somehow getting smothered despite the damage he is taking, so it's getting him even more excited. Sakura and Togame charge at each other one last time, and they both connect with kicks straight to one another's faces, and that was enough to have them both finally collapse to the ground. After that, both of them are laid out on the ground and trying to catch their breath, but they are still laughing from all the fun they just had. Togame never knew fighting could be so enjoyable, and neither did Sakura, since he has never experienced anything like this before, but the fight has gone on long enough, so Togame suggests they finish things once and for all. Sakura agrees, so the two charge at each other one last time, and as their feet cross, they wind up for the final punch of the match. As Sakura's fist is closing in on him, Togame recalls what Sakura said earlier about never backing down from an opponent even if he knows they are stronger than him, and that makes him realize that he should have done the same on the day Tomiyama lost the meaning of strength and fought him until he could realize he was wrong. But instead, he chose to turn a blind eye to his misguided friend and let him continue down the path he was headed. He failed to assert himself because his mentality was weak, but that isn't a problem Sakurama has since he isn't afraid to assert what he believes to be right, and he's probably going to grow to be a lot stronger than he was today. So Togame hopes Sakura never changes and keeps being the same hard-headed fighter he got to meet today. Sakura's fist is the first to connect, so it looks like Togame has lost this fight, but even as he is falling to the ground, he is thankful to Sakura for showing him what it means to be truly strong. Once he is on the ground, he raises his hand and says he is down for the count, so Sakura is to be declared the victor of the fight. None of the Lion's head members can believe that their captain would actually surrender in a fight, and neither can Sakura, so they think they must have misheard him or something, but there's no mistaking it. Togame clearly said he gives up, so Sakura just beat the second in command of Lion's head, but he doesn't seem very happy about it. He knows Togame still had more in the tank, so he asks why he would choose to give up and let Sakura win. But before he could get an answer, Tomiyama jumps up on stage and compliments Sakura on being really strong, so he would love to fight him sometime. But since his match with Togame is officially over, he wants to get his own fight with Umemiya started and begins calling him onto the stage. Sakura tries to stop him since he doesn't want to end his fight yet, as he isn't satisfied with the results yet. But while this is going on, Togame gets up and attempts to make up for his earlier mistakes. He tells Tomiyama that what he is doing is wrong, and they should just end things here, but as he is about to touch Tomiyama, he gets hit with one of the quickest roundhouse kicks I've ever seen and goes flying into the wall because of it. Even though they were friends a few moments ago, Tomiyama can't stand the sight of Togame anymore and tells him to shut up. But what he just did earned him the wrath of Sakura, so he gets grabbed by the collar and is about to get punched, but he seems to be happy about it. Just before Sakura can land the punch though, Umemiya arrives on stage and catches his arm. He asks Sakura to let it go, but Sakura seems really determined to wipe that smug look off Tomiyama's face. Umemiya understands that Sakura was able to understand Togame through their fight, as him getting angry on his behalf a proof of that, but he's going to have to sit this one out. He then turns to Togame and asks him to leave fighting Tomiyama to him. Togame accepts Umemiya's request, and as he leaves the stage, he asks him to make sure he doesn't die while fighting Tomiyama. Seeing that Togame was willing to walk away from the fight after he got violated with that kick, it doesn't make sense for him to stay angry over it, so he walks away as well and leaves it up to Umemiya. But as he leaves, he tells Umemiya that he had better not lose to someone like Tomiyama, because if he does, then Sakura is going to make him regret it. As he is walking off, Sakura can't understand why he is still so pissed off about this whole thing, since it shouldn't bother him as much as it is. He thought he was used to guys getting beat up around him, but seeing Togame get kicked like that made him really angry for some reason. Umemiya was saying it was because Sakura managed to have a really good conversation with Togame in their fight, but he still doesn't understand what that was supposed to mean since he didn't hear a single word from his fists. He hops off stage, but he loses his balance and has to be caught by Narei, who welcomes him back. He was really moved by the show Sakura just put on, so he ended up crying a little, but he couldn't help himself. Hiraji gets Sakura's attention and tells him that while he may be upset about Togame tapping out of their fight and making it end prematurely, even with the unsatisfying ending, he wants Sakura to know that he did really well. Sakura appreciates the compliment, although he tries to act like he doesn't care, and back on stage, Tomiyama is eagerly calling out to Umemiya so that they can get their fight started. But before that, Umemiya wants to ask Tomiyama a question. He wants to know if he felt anything at all while watching the fight between Sakura and Togame. But Tomiyama says he didn't and questions why he would feel anything from someone else's fight. However, he doesn't really care that much and just wants to get his fight with Yumemiya started. He is especially excited because Bofurun has so many strong guys, unlike Lion's Head's strongest fighters who have all been defeated in battle. He thinks Lion's Head sucks, but if he wins this match, then both Yumemiya and all of Bofurun would become his property, and he should finally be able to have fun again like he used to. He admires Yumemiya for being the top dog of Furin, and as such, being the coolest person there. He always seems to be having so much fun, so if Tomiyama can beat him and prove that he is the new strongest, then he should be able to have the same amount of fun. And that's all he wants, to be able to finally end his constant state of boredom. So he impatiently charges at Yumemiya so he can achieve his dream of an exciting life. Yumemiya tries to stop him with a punch, but Tomiyama outplays him and ends up on his shoulders where he starts punching Yumemiya's head. And when Yumemiya tries to counterattack, Tomiyama uses his momentum against him and swings behind him to continue the attack. Tomiyama is clearly insanely fast, but he has yet to actually land a decisive blow on Yumemiya, because Yumemiya is just as quick with his reactions. They break it up for a moment, and Narai is petrified from amazement at what he just witnessed. Suwa has never seen such wild movements used in a fight before, but everyone now understands how Tomiyama managed to become the leader of Lion's Head at such a young age. Sakura is internally cursing himself because now that he has seen what Tomiyama can actually do, he realizes that if he had actually attacked him back then, he would have been kissing the floor in a matter of seconds. He is smart enough to know he is no match for Tomiyama right now, so he intends to get stronger so he can face someone like him. Back with Yumemiya and Tomiyama, neither side has made much headway in the fight, as in spite of Tomiyama's monkey-like agility, Yumemiya still has a counter for everything he has been thrown so far. In the middle of the fight, Yumemiya tells Tomiyama that he won't find the happiness he is looking for by thinking about what he doesn't have and trying to take things from other people. But his words just make Tomiyama mad because he doesn't understand what Yumemiya means. He jumps into the air to attack again, but this time Yumemiya has unlocked his One Punch Man skill tree, so Tomiyama sees a death sentence hurtling in his direction. He manages to barely dodge the punch, but the sheer pressure from it still left him with a nasty nosebleed. Yumemiya now realizes that there is no way Tomiyama is going to understand what he means, but if he is incapable of grasping the concept Yumemiya is trying to teach him, then there is no way he will ever be able to win this fight. As the fight between Tomiyama and Yumemiya continues to heat up, Tomiyama uses his speed advantage to slip between Yumemiya's legs, and once he is behind him, he grabs hold of Yumemiya's jacket and pulls him back for a straight foot to the back. But despite what should have been a devastating blow, Yumemiya is not fazed by it in the slightest and turns around to deliver another death punch to Tomiyama. Tomiyama is able to react and dodge out of the way once more, but he can't understand what he's doing wrong since he was so sure that he was landing solid hits on Yumemiya, but he doesn't look like his health bar is going down at all. Yumemiya explains that it is because Tomiyama's punches are light, but Tomiyama finds this to be really insulting. Yumemiya goes on to explain that the reason Tomiyama's punches feel light to him is because he is fighting with no one behind him for support, but Tomiyama still doesn't understand what friendship has to do with any of this, so even if his punches are apparently light, he's just going to keep raining them down on Yumemiya until he eventually goes down. Tomiyama then charges in again for another attack, trying to overwhelm Yumemiya's defenses, and when he finally sees an opening, he sweeps Yumemiya off his feet and connects with a heavy uppercut. However, Yumemiya is still unfazed by this and simply tells Tomiyama as much before spiking him against the ground. The crowd is in stunned silence as Tomiyama struggles to get back to his feet. And once he finally does, he begins another desperate series of attacks in hopes of claiming his freedom as the strongest. As Yumemiya dodges Tomiyama's first punch, he asks him what he thinks it means to be free. So while still throwing an attack, Tomiyama answers that freedom means being able to have fun. And fun means being able to fight strong guys like he is doing right now. But if this is what Tomiyama thinks is fun, Yumemiya finds it odd that he doesn't look like he's enjoying it at all. Tomiyama clearly doesn't understand what he wants, which is why he is so unsatisfied with his life and is trying to steal Furin. That is why Yumemiya pities him, but not as much as the team who is stuck with him as their terrible leader. But whatever his reasons may have been, he became the top dog here, so Yumemiya is going to teach him how a real leader is meant to act. As the others watch Yumemiya one-sidedly beat down Tomiyama, Narai starts talking about how glad he is that he came to Furin Academy and has Yumemiya as his leader. Back on stage, Tomiyama still doesn't understand what Yumemiya is talking about when he says he should treat his people better. There was a time when everyone looked like they were having fun, but that was a long time ago. And he still doesn't understand why things changed from the way they were before. There is so much that Tomiyama still doesn't understand, and he is tired of people bringing it up, so he gives up and declares that he no longer wants to steal Yumemiya's friends. He doesn't need them or anything for that matter anymore. Tomiyama's world turned gray a long time ago and can barely remember when things became like this. To him, the world is dry and cold, but nothing he does can change it, so he has been wondering what he was missing to bring the color back to his world. But now, he doesn't care anymore. He has accepted that there is nothing that could ever change the lifeless wasteland that is his heart, so he doesn't need anything anymore. He may have also gone a bit crazy, and Yumemiya notices the change in his state of mind, so as Tomiyama charges forward at him, he just lets himself get hit. And even as he is taken to the ground and is having his face pounded in, he still isn't fighting back, so Sakura gets up in a rage. Yumemiya said there was no way he was going to lose, so what's with the sorry display he is putting on? But then Sadisha tells Sakura to shut up, sit down, and just let Yumemiya cook. Once Tomiyama has finally tried himself out from punching Yumemiya, Yumemiya apologizes to him for backing him into a corner with such a difficult question. But if he keeps destroying everything around him and hurting others in an attempt to find the answer, then things will always stay the same for him. Tomiyama doesn't want to hear any more from Yumemiya, so he bites down on his throat hard enough to draw blood. I don't know what kind of throat exercises Yumemiya does, but he does even flinch at possibly getting his windpipe crushed, and instead, he comforts Tomiyama and tells him that the answer he's looking for has been inside him all along. This gets Tomiyama to stop biting into his neck, so Yumemiya asks him if he remembers the last time Lion's Head and Furin got into a fight. In the end, it turned out to be a huge misunderstanding, but back then, as the fight had been broken up, Yumemiya could clearly see that Tomiyama was having a lot of fun with his teammates. Back then, Tomiyama's punches had actual weight to them, unlike now, and had a lot more warmth to him back then as well. He wants Tomiyama to think back to that time and realize what he needs to change. Yumemiya then gets up and starts approaching Tomiyama, so Tomiyama flinches, thinking he is about to receive payback for all the punches he hit Yumemiya with, but he actually gets a taste of the warmth of Yumemiya's hand. Yumemiya is trying his hardest to get Tomiyama to remember what he was like back then because as the top dog of Lion's Head, he needs to fit the role better. And to make sure he understands, Yumemiya hits him with a devastating headbutt. It was so hard that Tomiyama got sent into a flashback from before he became Lion's Head's leader. He was busy looking at a cat at the time. But then he was called over by his friends who complain about him being so absent-minded at times. They are on their way to a fight right now, so if Tomiyama ever wants to become their leader, he's going to have to pull himself together. Tomiyama apologizes, but now that he thinks about it, he doesn't even know who they are going to be fighting today. Everyone is frozen for a second, but they soon all burst out in laughter at Tomiyama's forgetful nature, and Tomiyama was having a good laugh about it as well. Those were really fun times, so Tomiyama hoped things would stay like this forever, but as we all know, they changed for the worse all too abruptly. Tomiyama was left alone in the dark, figuratively walking on broken glass. He ends up falling through, and that's when he finally realizes that he must be dreaming. But even if it was just a dream, Tomiyama felt good getting to experience the good old days again. He wakes up to find Togang standing over him, and he can't understand why he is making such a sad face, but then he realizes that it is because he lost to Yumemiya. That aside, he tells Togang about the dream he had about the past where everyone was smiling and having fun. Seeing that made something click in his mind, so he now realizes that he can only really have fun when everyone around him is also having fun too. Togang apologizes to Tomiyama for not being able to support him in his time of need. None of them knew why he was suffering, so they chose to leave his side. Togang hated seeing Tomiyama hurt others, and he couldn't forgive him for shattering his dream. Tomiyama never knew about Togang's dream, and that dream was to have Tomiyama be loved by everyone. That's why when he saw the look in Tomiyama's eyes, even though he knew it was wrong, he looked the other way and facilitated Tomiyama's spiral of misguided strength. But after getting to fight Sakura and learning of his ideals to never back down, he realizes that as a member of Lion's Head, he should have confronted Tomiyama right then and there to make his feelings known. He once again apologizes for not talking to Tomiyama and leaving him alone to face his confusion. Because he wasn't able to be there for him, Tomiyama ended up losing the thing that was most important to him. Tomiyama tells Togang that he worked so hard to become top dog because he thought it would make him have more fun than ever, so it was like chasing after a treasure chest at the top of a hill. He was so excited to get there because something amazing was bound to happen once he did, but as he reached his goal and opened the chest, all he found was a big fat pile of nothing. He felt nothing and had nothing left to look forward to, so he was scared. He felt hollow inside, and no matter what he did, that emptiness was never filled. He knew he had to do something to fix this, but he had no idea where to start, and over time, his world grew darker and darker. After struggling with it for a long time, he eventually began to blame the team as a whole for his lack of fun. He rationalized that it was because the team as a whole was weak that he was not having any fun, so his reasoning led him to believe that if he made sure only strong people were allowed to be in Lion's Head, then they would all be free and able to have fun together. He assured Togame that he is not responsible for anything that Tomiyama lost because he can now see that he was the one who threw away the good friends he had. Thinking back to how he always used to laugh to his heart's content with everyone around him, he had always been free, but he just couldn't recognize what he had until he lost it. And even worse, he was the one who destroyed it with his own hands. If not for Togame, there probably wouldn't have been anything left of Lion's Head by now. Togame doesn't want to take credit for anything, but Yumemiya told him not to hurt the people close to him. He apologizes for all the hurt he must have been put through and thanks him for still trying his hardest to keep things running with a misguided leader like Tomiyama. He can't begin to imagine how hard it was to bear, so he apologizes over and over as tears start to stream down his face. Eventually, he gets up and thanks Togame one last time for everything he has done for him, but it is time to put an end to this and make things right. He walks over to Yumemiya, who has been standing at the edge of the stage, and takes off his jacket to the shock of everyone there. Tomiyama lost the match fair and square, so he is stepping down as the leader of Lion's Head and handing control over to Yumemiya, just like they had agreed upon when this duel was arranged. He asks Yumemiya to please take good care of everyone here for him, but Yumemiya never wanted to take Lion's Head to begin with. That stupid bet was all Tomiyama's idea to begin with anyway, so he never had any intentions of actually taking Lion's Head if he won. Besides, he doesn't want to have to deal with a bigger team because he already has his hands full with all the hierarchy stuff, and he really hates boring things like that. But since Tomiyama is insisting, Yumemiya offers an alternative instead. From today onwards, they'll all just be friends with each other, and they can just call today's fight a group hangout session or something. With that, he addresses the crowd and thanks them all for coming out to watch the fight. The crowd is completely confused, but for the first time in a while, Tomiyama is able to genuinely laugh at how hilarious Yumemiya is. And now that everything is settled, Yumemiya calls for everyone to pack up and head home. After that, Yumemiya asks if there are any good takeout places nearby, and when asked why he wants to know, Yumemiya simply answers that it's because he wants to throw an after party to celebrate the end of the tournament. So after they leave the theater, everyone heads up to the roof where they lay out some cardboard and have a banquet. Yumemiya loves the quality of food, so he immediately starts scarfing everything down while the others take moderate bites. Mirai can't believe they all still have appetites after what they went through, and neither does Sue, who hasn't touched any of the food, so Mirai is glad he's not the only one here with who lost his appetite. Although Sue says he's just not eating because he's on a diet. Meanwhile, Sakura is trying to understand why Yumemiya is able to calmly eat with Tomiyama after the fight they just had, if you can even call what Tomiyama was doing fighting. Sakura knows he could never forgive someone for that kind of behavior, yet Yumemiya doesn't seem to care. In fact, he's more worried about the fact that Togame hasn't eaten anything yet, so he asks Togame if everything's alright. Togame has been thinking a lot, so he puts his plate down and bows his head to everyone to apologize. Everything about this tournament arc was caused by him, from the initial confrontation to the deterioration of the Lion's Head group as a whole. Tomiyama also feels like he's responsible for everything, so he bows his head as well to apologize for what he has done. Since they are apologizing, Yumemiya leaves the choice of whether to forgive Togame and Tomiyama up to Sakura, as he clearly still has his grievances with them. Togame says he is willing to accept any punishment that Sakura gives him, and Sakura still doesn't like what Togame did them they first met one another, but he also realizes that Togame isn't all bad after their fight, so Sakura just tells Togame to make sure he becomes a decent person from now on. Togame promises, so Yumemiya declares that the matter is officially settled and he goes back to eating. Yumemiya seems to be having a lot of fun, so Tomiyama asks him how he always seems to be enjoying himself as top dog of Furin. Yumemiya answers that it's because he loves eating good food, but it's only really fun when he gets to do it with his friends and chat about funny stuff. That's why he's having so much fun right now, and it has nothing to do with him being top dog at all. Tomiyama understands what Yumemiya means since he recalls how much fun he used to have before he became top dog of Lion's Head, but he mistakenly thought he would have more fun if he rose up in the ranks, so he doesn't know why he couldn't figure out that he already had everything he needed. Yumemiya tells him it's not his fault since people are naturally inclined to not realize how good they have it until they lose everything. But thankfully, Tomiyama realized his error before he lost everyone he held dear, and Yumemiya is glad Tomiyama can have fun again. Tomiyama still has one more question for Yumemiya and asks why he chose to become top dog of Furin, even though he knew it wouldn't be any more fun than his normal status. And that's because he wanted to make sure everyone was happy and smiling so they can all be happy together. That's why he thought of what he could do to help the town as a whole and ultimately decided to become top dog. Becoming top dog was never the goal, but it allows him to do what he really wants, and that's to make sure everyone can always be happy here. If there was an alternative, Yumemiya probably wouldn't have gone for the top dog position. But if he had done that, then he would never have been able to share meals with everyone here. Tomiyama admires Yumemiya for understanding what he wanted even before becoming top dog, but Yumemiya clarifies that he never became top dog, he was appointed. You can't just take the title by yourself because it's something that you earn by having the support of the people around you. They all believed in the goal Yumemiya was working towards and helped him achieve it, so no matter how hard or unfair things get, he swears that he won't let them down. After their meal is over, Yumemiya says goodbye to Tomiyama and Togame, telling them that he had a lot of fun here and he'd love to have them visit Furin sometime. As a parting gift, Yumemiya offers Tomiyama a bread roll he happened to have in his pocket, and Tomiyama accepts the gift happily. As Yumemiya and the others leave, Tomiyama and Togame are left alone, and Tomiyama begins talking about how he knows apologizing won't fix the damage he has done, but he doesn't know what to do in order to make things right, or if he can still make things right at all. And he really doesn't want to lose his friends. Togame understands how Tomiyama feels since he has done terrible things as well, and he can't make up for it all by simply apologizing, but that is just more of a reason why he needs to face his mistakes. He'll be right there beside Tomiyama, so he suggests that they both work together to fix things no matter how hard it is. Back on Buffer and Turf, the kid that was saved at the start of this whole mess has been waiting outside Koto's cafe, and as soon as he sees the guys returning from battle, he takes off running in their direction. Yumemiya can't believe Sasaki has been waiting here this entire time, but he tells him that there's no need to worry since the job's been done. They all head into the cafe, and Konoha was expecting to have to bust out the bandages after the fight they must have had, but she's surprised to see that everyone has already been patched up, except for Sue since he didn't let Kanuma touch him even once. Although in contrast, Sakura got messed up pretty badly. She welcomes them back, but Sakura can barely look her in the eye because he now realizes she was right when she had told him that he can't become top dog alone. Yumemiya was only able to do it because he had people supporting him, but Sakura's whole reason for coming here was just so that he could be top dog, so he's having an identity crisis and just wants to leave. However, before he can walk out the door, he gets grabbed by Yumemiya, who's not going to let him leave so soon. He asks Kotoha to prepare some of her special coffees to celebrate. Sakura complains that he doesn't need to be here since there's nothing to celebrate in the first place, but there's always something to celebrate when Yumemiya has something to say, so Yumemiya dubs this day Conversation Day in honor of Sakura having his first conversational fight with Togame. It makes no sense to Sakura or anyone else for that matter, but that's not the only reason Yumemiya wants Sakurama to stay since he has something he'd like to discuss with him. Sakura had thought he could become top dog just by being strong, but he now realizes that he was dead wrong. And right now, the top dog wants to know how Sakura's first fight conversation went. Sakura doesn't really know what to say because he didn't hear anything coming from Togame's fists, but Yumemiya bursts out in laughter because he now realizes that Sakura must have misunderstood him. When he said fights can be conversations, he didn't mean that you start hearing voices from the fists. What he was referring to was the primal method of communicating, a way of talking about simple things like love or hate. At the mention of love, Sakura spits out his coffee and goes straight into Yumemiya's eyes, so Sagasha was prepared to jump in to defend his boss from Sakura's caffeinated attack. The others calm him down since it was an accident, but Kotoha doesn't care that it was an accident and tells them that they need to clean up the mess themselves. As Yumemiya wipes himself down, he adds more context to what he said earlier and asks Sakura if he began to like Togame after their fight conversation. That's the only reason he would have tried to avenge him after Tomiyama knocked him out. That's how Yumemiya knows Sakura was able to have a good conversation with him through their fists. Sakura can't deny that he started to understand Togame a bit better after his fight with him, but he doesn't get why it's such a big deal in the first place. Yumemiya just answers that he's happy for Sakura. He had heard that someone would be coming here from out of town, and he initially thought it would have to be an interesting person, so he was interested in meeting Sakura. But after these few days, Sakura has been in town. Yumemiya can say with 100% certainty that Sakura is a good person. And when a good person like Sakura comes to town, Yumemiya is always happy to celebrate. If that's the case, then Hiraji says he could have just called this a welcoming party for Sakura instead of a conversation party, and Yumemiya thinks that's a great idea. Sakura still can't believe the people here are so accepting of him, and especially how Yumemiya is able to pull to his side so easily. Sakura came here to take the top dog title from Yumemiya, but now he knows that he can't do that. It's never been accepted by anyone before, which is why he vowed to get strong all on his own. He came here so that he could become number one and feel validated in his lonesome pursuit of strength. But it turns out that you need the support of others to even become top dog, and since Sakura can accept other people, he'll never be able to become number one. Narei stops Sakura right there and corrects his statement about not being able to accept others, because yesterday, when he first met Narei, despite him getting beaten up, Sakura still said Narei wasn't lame, which made him really happy. Narei ended up forgetting the rest of what he wanted to say, but Sakura still got the message though. Yumemiya then asks Sakura if he knows what it takes to have a conversation with your fists, and Sakura doesn't know, so Yumemiya explains that you need to want to face your opponent and want to get to know them. And Sakura was able to do that. Yumemiya isn't saying Sakura needs to accept everyone around him all of a sudden, but if he wants to learn to accept people, he at least needs to start by facing them first. The fact that Sakura was able to do that with Togame is proof that still wants to accept that people around him can be good. And if he can come to accept people, then he'll be able to achieve anything he wants, even becoming top dog. The warm smiles of the people around him reassure Sakura that not all people are as bad as he thought, but it's still really embarrassing for him. So he blurts out that when he becomes top dog, that it would mean he defeated Yumemiya, and while that's certainly true, Yumemiya just laughs and says it's a problem for the future him to deal with. Just then, Sagisha gets up and lifts a chair to throw at Sakura since he has been getting jealous of all the bonding Sakura has been doing with Yumemiya. Hiraji is holding him back, but Sakura is totally ready to fight if Sagisha wants to, and Konoha just yells for them to take it outside if they really want to fight. The next day, Sakura walks out into the street and he's still feeling the effects of his fight yesterday, but the only thing on his mind right now is the advice Yumemiya gave him about trying to get to know the people around him. As he's walking, Suwa and Narei come up from behind to greet him, and this leaves Sakura totally shocked. They had been calling out to him for a while now, and they didn't mean to startle him, but Shu finds Sakura's reactions to be hilarious anyway. They all walk to class together, but as they go through the halls, Narei notices that everyone seems to be staring at them, so he's getting a bit nervous. Suwa says it's perfectly normal for people to stare after what happened yesterday, and Sakura doesn't care what others think of him in the first place, so he just ignores them and opens the class door. However, as he does this, he immediately gets swarmed by dozens of students who all want to hear about the fight Suwa and Sakura had yesterday, but neither Suwa nor Sakura wants to deal with explaining everything, so they dump the task onto Narei's shoulders. However, as Narei is about to give a detailed account of everything that happened, one guy from the back of the class asks to be included in the conversation. It's the guy who was working out in class when Sakura first got here, and Mirai recognizes him as Tsuge. According to Narei, Tsuge may be a bit strange, but he has just as much skill as Su or Sagishita, so he's no joke. Tsuge ignores Sakura and starts asking Su if he's finally ready to give him the answer he has been asking for. Su still doesn't want to answer him, and Tsuge is okay with that for now since he also has something he wants to ask Sakura. He then proceeds to flex his muscles and asks Sakura what his virtue is. Tsuge always asks every guy he meets this question, and he feels it's important because every man has an ideal that they live by, so he wants to know what that is. Narei understands what he means since he is also obsessed with gathering information about the people he likes. For instance, he knows that Tsuge always wears his right shoe first and drinks nothing but protein shakes. Tsuge is creeped out that Narei knows so much about him despite them having never met before, but he can respect the commitment to stalking, so he takes a liking to Narei. Sakura thinks Tsuge is weird, so he has his doubts that he is actually strong. However, Su can guarantee that Tsuge is really strong, although he doesn't like the guy much either. Since people had gathered around to hear Sakura's story, Tsuge suggests that they all hang out after school to talk about virtue instead. However, all of a sudden, everyone seems to be really busy, so they decline and walk away. Sagisha then walks into the room, but he takes one look at Tsuge and decides he wants no part in whatever he's got going on, so he turns and goes straight to his desk. Tsuge asks the three to join him instead, but Sakura and Su don't want to go either. However, Narei drags them along anyway, and they all later arrive at Tsuge's favorite restaurant. The place looks like a lucha ring, so Sakura doubts there will be anything tasty here to eat. But as Tsuge shows him one of the menu items, he realizes the food actually looks pretty good. Tsuge asks if Sakura really likes food, because if so, that could be his virtue, but Sakura tells him he doesn't have any particular interest in food. Tsuge sees that Sakura doesn't feel like talking about his virtue, so he just asks him to fight instead. This catches Sakura's attention, but Suge isn't mad or anything. He just remembers how cool Sakura looked when he declared that he would become the top dog of Furin, so there's no way he doesn't have some kind of virtue in him. But if he doesn't want to talk about it with words, then Suge wants Sakura to tell him with his fists instead. Sakura is down for a good fight, but their attention is drawn to the front door as one of their classmates walks in. Sakura recognizes Kiryu, but he also notices that he's holding hands with a girl, and Sakura has never done that before, so he hangs his head in defeat. Kiryu greets his classmates, but as he notices that Suge is here, he decides to take his date to the back of the restaurant to be as far away from his weirdness as possible. Mireille is excited to see Kiryu here since it means that 4 of the 5 strongest people in the first-year class are all here at once. Suge is glad to see Mireille is having fun, and Mireille goes on to talk about how Kiryu used to attend a rich kid's middle school, but that didn't stop him from single-handedly beating up older delinquents. He also has Unspoken Re's pre-installed, so he's naturally popular with the ladies. In fact, Mireille wonders if the girl he brought with him might be his girlfriend, but Sakura doesn't want to hear anything about romance and insists that he only wants to learn about how strong Kiryu is. And Suge proceeds to yell out to Kiryu and tell them that Sakura wants to know more about him. Kiryu turns back to make eye contact with Sakura, and he doesn't mind talking with him, but it's going to have to be later since he's still in the middle of a date right now. Suge doesn't seem to get the hint, so he keeps pestering Kiryu to join them for a chat now, also inviting the girl to join them. But she seems pretty scared, so Kiryu tells Suge to knock it off. He knows Suge doesn't mean any harm, but he's built like a truck, so if a guy like him starts yelling out of nowhere, it'd obviously scare people, and if he doesn't learn to adjust his behavior, he's never going to be popular with girls. Suge realizes his mistake and sincerely apologizes for scaring the girl, but since she's already been frightened, Kiryu suggests that they go to another restaurant instead. Suya feels bad about scaring the girl since it goes against his own virtue, but before he can elaborate further, they notice a commotion going on outside. By the front door, Kiryu and the girl have been surrounded by a gang, and when the others come out to figure out what's going on, Kiryu informs them that he saw a guy harassing a girl, so he knocked him out and brought the girl here with him. But I guess the guy wanted revenge, so he went and brought his friends to track Kiryu and the girl down. It looks like Kiryu was just helping the girl out, so Suge grabs his shoulder and starts telling him how awesome he thinks he is. His virtue must be being considerate to girls, but while Suge is still going on and on about virtue, Kiryu tells him that now is not the time to be distracted. But Suge doesn't listen, so Kiryu is about to get attacked from behind. Luckily, Sakura intervenes and knocks the assailant down with a kick. If there's one thing Sakura hates, it's people who go for jumping tactics in a fight, so he's not going to let them get away with it. Suge agrees with Sakura, so both of them are ready to face the mob together, and for her own safety, Shu asks the girl to stand back so she doesn't end up becoming a hostage or something. He'll be sitting this fight out, but he assures her that those 3 are more than capable of handling a fight like this. Suge asks Sakura if he wants to sit this one out as well since he is still injured from his fight yesterday, but Sakura never backs down from a fight. As the mob attacks, one goes straight for Suge with a punch, and Suge gets knocked straight down. But as the guy goes for his second punch, Suge catches his hand and lets everyone know that he always lets his opponent get the first hit in battle before he fights back. He then suplexes the guy in the most flashy way possible because his virtue is to always take the spotlight. Sakura thinks that's stupid, but Suge was always weird to begin with, so he just keeps fighting. All of a sudden, one guy comes flying at Sakura from behind, so he quickly turns around to kick the guy away, and afterwards he complains to Kiryu about him sending people flying in his direction. Kiryu says he thought it would be quicker if he just sent the attackers in Sakura's direction, so as another guy tries to sneak up on him, he sends the guy flying towards Sakura. Since it's basically only Sakura and Suge doing the fighting, Mireille wonders if Kiryu is just pushing people their way because he enjoys it, but Sue thinks it's more so because he wants to keep the attackers far away from the girl and Mireille who can't fight at all. He tells Kiryu that he doesn't have to worry about it though since he's here to protect them. And as one guy tries to go after the others, Sue gives him a first-class ticket to the floor. With all the bases covered, the fight ends in an overwhelming victory for the Furin boys, and since the fight is over, Suge tells Sakura he can say the slogan now. Sakura doesn't know what he's talking about, but it's understandable that he doesn't know the slogan since it has only been 3 days since he got here. So Suge tells him to memorize what he's about to say. Anyone who causes pain, destruction, or holds evil intentions in their heart will be purged by Bafurin without exception. And to really let the message sink in, Kiryu goes up to the guide who started this whole mess and warns him of what will happen if he does something stupid like this again. Once they leave, Kiryu tells the girl that she's safe now and she is sincerely thankful for how much he and the others have helped her. As she is leaving, Kiryu remarks that he knew Sakura had to be strong after how he handled his fight with Sagashita, but he never imagined Sakura would be this strong. Suge mentions that Sakura is aiming to become the top dog eventually, but Kiryu didn't know about that since he was busy playing a game when Sakura was first introducing himself. He's glad he learned about how strong Sakura is before the vote for the grade captain. But that aside, he wants to get Sakura's contact info so they can keep in touch. The others want his number as well, but Sakura has never had friends before, so he doesn't know how to send his info. In that case, Kiryu says he'll just add his number to Sakura's phone, but once he opens Sakura's contacts, he sees that Sakura only has one contact named Weather, and they all think it's pretty funny. They all end up giving Sakura their phone numbers, and the next day, Sakura is spacing out and staring at all of his new contacts when Kotoha walks up behind him and asks what he's looking at. Sakura gets startled and drops his phone, so Kotoha apologizes for sneaking up on him like that. But as she goes to pick up his phone for him, she notices the contacts and decides to add her phone number to it. Sakura acts like he doesn't care, but he's glad to have another addition to his contact list. He then notices he's in a group chat with all the other guys, so he wants to ask them about the grade captain thing Kiryu had mentioned yesterday, but he's not used to texting, so he can't find the right time to jump in with his question. So instead, he just eats his food and goes to class to ask them directly. He's new to texting, so Sue can understand why Sakura wouldn't be able to get the hang of it so soon, but they'll be hearing about the grade captain soon enough. A moment later, the three leaders of the second year come in. Enomoto, Kusumi, and Kaji, and Mirai is really excited to see them. Enomoto tells everyone that he doesn't care how they do it, that they need to decide on who will be their grade captain right now. The grade captain is the one who is responsible for the class, so basically it's the person at the top of the class. Sue raises his hand, so Sakura thinks he may be volunteering for the position, but then Sue points in Sakura's direction and nominates him to be grade captain. Sakura tries to refuse the position, but then Suge speaks up as well and says he thinks Sakura would be a good fit for the job as well. He was awesome both on his first day and yesterday, so he sees no reason to pick anyone else. Kiryu then joins in and nominates Sakura as well, and so does Mirai. Sakura appreciates the confidence they have in him, but he thinks someone like Sagashita would be better suited for the job. Okay, maybe not, but he still doesn't think he can do it. In the first place, he has no idea how he would even handle a role like that, plus, compared to the rest of them, he is still an outsider. But a background character tells him that it doesn't matter if he's an outsider since all of them already accept him for who he is, and besides, 3 of the strongest people in class already want him to have the position, so no one is going to complain about it. If Sakura takes the job, Sue says he will take the secondary position, and as for the third position, Mirai can handle that. The most important thing here is that everyone is saying they are fine with Sakura being the class's leader, but Sakura has to think about it a little. Yumimiya became the leader of Furin because he had a goal he wished to accomplish, but Sakura only ever thought about becoming top dog for self-recognition, so he does not have any goals in mind if he is given a leadership position. He has been thinking about it ever since Yumimiya's picnic, and he now realizes that he is just like Tomiyama, a strong guy with no purpose. While Sakura is still puzzled as to what to do now, Kaji finishes his candy, so he starts yelling for the class to hurry up and decide already. His voice is way too loud, and they are confused as to why he is shouting so much. But then one of the other guys takes his headphones off, and without music blasting in his ear, Kaji can now speak normally. He points to Sakura and tells him that he is now the grade captain, and there will be no more discussion on the matter. Sakura tries to argue, but Kaji tells everyone that the position is just for grade captain, and no one expects him to perfect at it from the start, so he can just learn as he gets used to the role. And if he really can't handle it, someone else can just take over for him later. Sakura doesn't get why Kaji thinks he gets to decide, but to his utter shock, he is informed that Kaji is actually the grade captain for the second-year students. Since Kaji said so, there's not much Sakura can do about it anymore, so everyone begins cheering for their new grade captain. Sue and Mirai tell Sakura he doesn't need to worry too much since they'll be by his side to help him along the way. Suge and Kiryu also promise to help him out as much as possible, but even if he is the grade captain now, he is still a member of the class, so he can just have fun with it. Mirai makes a suggestion that everyone should join a group chat with their new grade captain, and they all think it's a great idea, so they start asking Sakura for his contact info. While they do that, Enomoto calls over to them and tells Sakura, Sue, and Mirai that they should join a group chat with the other grade captains since they will need to keep in touch with one another. Mirai is ecstatic to have the contact info of some of the most famous second years, but Sakura seems indifferent to it. Enomoto tells him that his class has a lot of good guys in it, so he had better make sure to lead them well. Even if he says that, Sakura still has no idea what being a good leader means, so Enomoto tells him he doesn't have to worry about it yet, and for now he can just do whatever he wants. But that's the problem. Sakura doesn't really have anything he wants to do, so Enomoto comes up with an idea and tells the class that they'll be going on patrol with Kaji soon. While out on patrol, Sakura remembers Enomoto telling him to observe what kind of person Kaji is as a grade captain, so he is watching him carefully. But Mirai warns him not to stare at him too much since Kaji was known for getting into fights easily back in middle school, and they don't know what kind of thing could make him blow his fuse, so he thinks it is best not to aggravate him. Just then, they notice an old woman calling out to Kaji, and after getting his attention, she tells him that she lost her girl. It doesn't look like this is the first time something like this has happened, either since Kaji scolds her for not keeping a close eye on her girl, but he tells her there is no need to cry about it since he and his group will do something about it. The only detail the old lady remembers is that her girl is wearing a pink ribbon today, so Kaji tells her she should head home and wait in case her girl comes back by herself. The granny thanks Kaji and happily walks away, but as soon as she is gone, Kaji puts his headphones back on and delegates the search effort to Kusumi instead. The others are shocked that Kaji is acting so calm when there's a missing child out there, but it does look like Kusumi is sharing info with others so everyone can be on the lookout. And Sakura is determined to find this missing girl no matter what. He then looks at his phone and to his horror, Sue just quoted him in the group chat, so he starts yelling at Sue for it. Sue doesn't think it's a problem since the others are bound to get hyped for it, but Sakura worries that no one is going to react to it, so he will feel really embarrassed. However, he was worried for nothing as a bunch of his classmates immediately respond and start cheering him on to do his best to find the girl. But just as he is about to begin looking, he gets smacked on the face by a cat. At the same time, Enomoto comes running around the corner and tells Sakura to help him catch that cat, but Sakura doesn't understand why he wants the cat caught, so Enomoto explains that the cat is the girl the old lady is missing, Risa. With the new information, they begin chasing down Risa, but Risa climbs up a building, so there's nothing Enomoto or Mirai can do to reach her anymore. However, Sakura isn't out of options yet as he is able to parkour his way up the side of the building. The others are amazed by what Sakura is capable of, but as they still need to catch the cat, Enomoto tells the others to run ahead so that they can cut off Risa's escape route. Sakura is still chasing after Risa on the rooftops, but then she goes back down to the ground, so Sakura jumps down as well and starts running through the alleyway. However, as he is about to exit, he nearly hits a delivery worker, so he does a stylish flip over him to avoid a collision. Sakura proceeds to chase Risa all over the neighborhood, but Risa eventually jumps off a bridge and into the river, and Sakura isn't willing to go that far to catch her. However, Kaji, on the other hand, immediately jumps into the water to get Risa. Enomoto catches up to them, and since Kaji has Risa secure, he orders some guys to go get the granny and a towel for Kaji when he gets out. By the end of the day, Risa is safely returned to the granny, and she is really thankful to Kaji for helping her find her cat, but he just tells her that she shouldn't let this happen again. Kaji seems way more proactive as a grade captain than Sakura had initially thought, so he walks up to him and asks what his goal was for becoming grade captain. Sakura assumes Kaji must have had a reason for taking the role, but he doesn't really have a goal in mind. In fact, he never wanted the job to begin with, but his friends asked him to do it since they thought he would be great for the role, so he did it. It's the same as what happened to Sakura. But if that's the case, then Sakura says there's no reason for Kaji to keep being grade captain if he never chose the job to begin with, but this sets Kaji off. He looks really mad and looks like he's about to unleash his rage on Sakura, but he stops himself and takes some candy to calm himself down. He then tells Sakura that there are a lot of things he can't do on his own. Kaji can't round people up as well as Enomoto can, and he can't communicate with others like Kusumi, and even with his shortcomings, others still rely on him, so he does his best to live up to their expectations of him. Sakura didn't think it was fine to have no reason to be leader, but then again, Kaji's reason might be because he wants to live up to the expectations of those around him. He is still pondering his revelation when Mirai comes up behind him and offers him a treat they got as a reward for helping. Sakura was startled, but he accepts the dango, and while he is eating, Mirai begins talking about how amazing Sakura was when he started parkouring all over the place. Since they were chasing a cat, they would normally have lost sight of Risa almost immediately, but he knew they could count on Sakura, and Sakura is glad to know people appreciate him. The next day, Sakura heads into Kotoa's cafe, but he collapses at the door while carrying an old lady in. Kotoa goes to check if he's alright, but Sakura says he is fine even though he clearly looks sleep-deprived. He has spent the whole night thinking of what he could do to live up to everyone's expectations, but he can't let Kotoa know about that. Out of nowhere, Kotoa asks if Sakura's class has decided on their grade captain, and by the reaction Sakura gives her, she realizes that he must get the one who got the job. She thinks it is a good thing, but Sakura doesn't think anything good can possibly come from having a grade captain who doesn't know what he is doing. Since Sakura isn't confident in his ability to be a good grade captain, Konoha tells him he can just start by doing the things he is capable of doing. For instance, he could start by learning the names of everyone around him so he can show them that he cares, and now that he thinks about it, Sakura has never actually called anyone by their real name since he got here. But when Konoha and the granny start trying to get him to call them by their names, he gets embarrassed and runs away. Sakura has trouble when it comes to forming close relationships, but he decides to give Konoha's suggestion a try, so he asks Narei to tell him the names of all his classmates. Narei begins listing them off, but there are too many people for Sakura to memorize all their names at once. Still, it shows great initiative that he is at least trying. Just then, they hear an announcement from Yumemiya, who's calling all the grade captains to the roof for a meeting. It's really early in the morning, so once they get there, Sakura asks Enemono what's so important. Enemono explains that it's a way for all the different grade captains to meet each other, although most of them already know each other anyway. Sakura can't believe he now has to memorize the names of all the people here as well, but Narei promises to help him if he doesn't remember someone's name. He's about to start listing off the names here as well, but Sakura cuts him off and asks how he knows all the grade captains' names already, but Narei just memorized all the names and faces of every single student in the school. He isn't good at fighting, so figured he could at least make himself useful by acting as an encyclopedia for Sakura to keep track of people. Since Narei is making himself useful, Sue decides to become Sakura's negotiator since he is pretty good at getting people to accept requests or give up information. Sakura is amazed that Narei and Sue are able to find a role for themselves so easily, so he says he will let them do their thing. And just then, Yumemiya arrives and he apologizes for taking so long to get here, but Sakura notices that he has a lot of people with him, so he assumes they must be more grade captains, but Narei corrects him. These are the 4 kings of Furin High and their secondaries. Sakura doesn't understand what Narei is so excited about, so Narei reiterates that these are the 4 heavenly kings of Furin High: Chikokun teams Tsubakino, Komoku teams Mizuki, Zojo teams Momose, and of course, Taman teams Karaji. Yumemiya thanks everyone for coming out and tells them all that the people behind him will be leading Furin from now on, but before he talks about that, he has something more important to share with them. His garden has been fully transplanted thanks to the help of Sagashita, so the summer barbecue is going to be lit. Hiraji tells Yumemiya that now isn't the time to talk about his garden. He called everyone up here, so the least he can do is greet the new grade captains. Yumemiya wasn't really planning to give a big speech, but there is something he would like to say, so he turns to everyone and says he is counting on them. He may be strong, but he can't be everywhere at once, and he can't look out for everyone at the same time, so he wants them to look after one another for him. Everyone promises to live up to Yumemiya's expectations, and afterwards, they all begin conversing amongst themselves. After a while, Yumemiya comes over to Sakura's group, and he is happy to see that Sakura is the grade captain. He also tells Narei and Sue that he will be counting on them as well, but if any of them are ever in trouble, they shouldn't hesitate to rely on their upperclassmen for help. With that, the meeting is basically over, so Sakura and the others head back down to their class. Once they return, Suge begins asking what they were called up for, so Narei brags that they got to meet the 4 heavenly kings. After school, everyone heads out together, and since they don't have to go on patrol today, Suge suggests that they all hang out at a Lucha restaurant again. Narei seems to like that idea, but the others overruled his decision immediately. Just then, Sakura notices a couple of guys walking through the streets in matching white jackets, and they look pretty menacing, so he asks them if they are looking for something. The leader of the 3 days, they just so happen to be looking for a guy from Furin, but none of them are the person they are searching for, so they turn around to leave. As they walk away, Sue recognizes the logo on the back of their jackets as one belonging to the group known as Keel. Sue doesn't know much about them, but he knows there's nothing but bad rumors about them. Just then, they all hear an old lady scream at the top of her lungs as she looks into an alley and finds Anzai completely battered and bruised. Eventually, Anzai regains consciousness and sees everyone worriedly standing over him, but after they bring him inside and ask what happened, he makes up a lie about getting chased by a giant dog until he knocked himself out. No one is buying that story at all, even Sakura, so they ask Anzai to tell them what really happened, but he doesn't want to talk about it for some reason and makes up an excuse to leave. Before he leaves, Sue asks him if this has anything to do with the Keel guys that were around here earlier. Anzai tries to deny it, but his face tells them all they need to know. He still leaves to avoid talking about it any further, but even though they now know that Keel was behind it because of Anzai's reaction, the others don't know how Sue managed to figure out that Keel was involved. He didn't have a real reason to suspect them, but that guy earlier had the whole villainous plot pose and everything, so it was pretty hard to not draw a conclusion. With the information they now have, Narei asks Sakura what he plans to do now. If Keel really did beat Anzai up, then they need to help him. However, Sakura thinks jumping into action right away would be far too hasty. In the first place, Anzai didn't ask for their help, so maybe this is something he doesn't want to involve other people in. Even so, Narai still thinks it is their responsibility as his friends to help him even if he doesn't want help. And this makes Sakura recall what Yumemiya had said about everyone looking out for one another as much as possible, so he kicks up to leave in a hurry. But before he goes, the old lady offers him some food for the road as a gift from her. Sakura gets flustered, but he takes it and stomps off without saying another word. After the time he has spent with Sakura, he knows Sakura wants to help Anzai as well, although he would never admit it. Elsewhere that evening, Anzai is seen talking to a girl by the playground, and she is seriously worried about Anzai getting himself beat up like this, but he says he can handle this. In that case, the girl asks if he managed to convince Nagato to return to them, but unfortunately, he had no such luck. He is worried that Nagato would cross a line he can't come back from if he stays as a part of Keel. The girl tries to convince him to ask Bofurun for help, but Anzai still refuses to do so because Bofurun is a group that protects the town, and this is a personal matter for him, so he can't get everyone involved. The girl doesn't want him to handle this alone, so she offers to go with him next time he confronts Nagato, but Anzai rejects that idea as well as it is far too dangerous for her to join him. He tries to tell her that she doesn't need to worry, but with how much he has been beaten up already, there's no way she wouldn't be worried. As Anzai leaves, she sits on a bench and is approached by Sakura, who asks her to fill him in on the conversation she just had with Anzai. She is hesitant at first, but Sakura says he is in the same class as Anzai, and after looking at his Furin uniform, she knows that he isn't lying, so she agrees to explain things to him. She and Anzai are childhood friends, and they always used to play with one another when they were kids. Eventually, a kid called Nagato joined them, and even though they all went to different schools, she thought they could all stay friends. Recently, she happened to bump into Anzai at the playground and came over to catch up with him. She could see that he wasn't in the best shape, so she assumed he just got into another fight or something. She then mentioned wanting to see Nagato again so the three of them could get together again, but then Anzai explains that he got beaten up by someone from a group called Keel. He says the guy pursed Smashing while he was outside town, so he tried to stop him and grabbed the dude's arm. But when he got a good look at the dude, he realized it was actually Nagato. She doesn't believe Nagato could do something like this, so Anzai wanted to bring Nagato here so they could hear his side of the story, but Anzai returned beaten up and wouldn't tell her what happened to her. All he would say is that Keel are bad news, but he also said he would handle it himself. She feels frustrated that her friends are in trouble, and she is powerless to do anything to help, so she breaks down in tears, and Sakura still doesn't know how to handle emotions well, so he's at a loss for what to do. Eventually, he tells her he will bring Nagato here so they can sort out their differences. And the girl is pretty relieved to hear this, although Anzai said it was a bad idea to get Furin involved in this, but Sakura says it'll all work out eventually, so she can leave it to him. The girl smiles and thanks Sakura for being such a good guy. She then gets up and says this whole mess has made her really hungry, so Sakura possessively holds his food and tells her she can't have any, but she wasn't going to ask for Sakura's food anyway. Sakura did say he would help her, but now he has to think about how he's going to do it. He walks into class and is greeted by the others, but then he notices Anzai across the room as he's trying to pass off his injuries as a bear attack, but no one really believes it. Sakura knows Anzai would just change the subject if he asked about it directly, so he doesn't bother mentioning the discussion he had yesterday with Sochiya. Just then, someone from another class comes in looking for Anzai. He walks over to him and says a creepy guy in a hood met him outside and told him to give the letter to Anzai. Anzai recognizes that description, so he becomes terrified at what the letter may contain. He hesitantly opens it, and it's just as bad as he expected, so he takes off running. Sakura chases after him and tells Anzai to wait, but Anzai doesn't stop, so Sakura is forced to jump down the stairs to cut him off. He tells Anzai that he heard the whole story from Sochiya, so he knows that the letter must be from Keel. He snatches it to take a look, and it shows the members of Keel holding a bloody Nagato hostage unless Anzai comes down to the shipping yard. Anzai tells Sakura that this has nothing to do with him, but Sakura grabs his shoulder and asks for the details because he sincerely wants to help. Anzai finally agrees to fill Sakura in, so he tells him that 2 days ago he saw a member of Keel snatch an old lady's purse, so he decided to intervene and grab the guy. However, when pulled the guy's hood down, he realized that it was Nagato, and Nagato got so freaked out that he punched Anzai in the face and dropped the lady's purse. Anzai couldn't believe what he had just seen, so the next day he returns to the same spot so that he could find Nagato and get an explanation from him. And when he finally found him, he saw Nagato being yelled at for not stealing enough money, so the guy holding him by the shirt says he will punch him for every 1,000 yen he's short by. Anzai could just sit back and watch Nagato suffer a beating, so he ran in and kicked the leader away before extending a hand to Nagato so that they can escape. However, Nagato smacks his hand away and tells Anzai he shouldn't have come here. The others hand him a stick, and Nagato takes it. But he has a look on his face that says he isn't happy about what he has to do now. He took the stick and struck Anzai across the head with it, but eventually, Anzai managed to flee and end up in the alleyway where Sakura and the others found him. Sakura doesn't understand why Nagato would choose to stay with Keel after all the crappy stuff they've done to him, and Anzai doesn't understand either, but he knows something must be seriously wrong for Nagato to have been crying. Where they used to play together and Nagato broke his leg or they got lost in the forest, he never once shed a tear, so he can't imagine what could have happened to cause him to cry like that. You may not know exactly why Nagato is choosing to stay there, but he knows he needs to get him out of Keel for his own good. Sakura understands, so he tells Anzai to hurry up so they can go save Nagato. Anzai tells Sakura that he doesn't want to get Furin involved in his problems, but Sakura says he isn't going as a member of Furin. He's going because Tsuchiya asked him to bring Nagato back, so it's his problem as well now. At the same time, everyone in the class starts coming down the stairs since they had heard the whole story. They ask Anzai why he didn't tell them, and he says he didn't want Furin to get involved because they are meant to protect the town, so they have no business with what goes on out of town. Shu says they aren't helping him out because they are members of Furin, they are helping him because they are his friends. Now that everything is settled, the entirety of Class 1 heads out to the abandoned shipping yard to rescue Nagato. The end.